afternoon. It's 1:07. Just kidding, it's 2.
I was like,
Checking, make sure everybody's awake in here. Madam Clerk, you mind clinking the roll here?
Here.
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 Present.
Yes.
Aye.
Here.
I didn't know if you were doing your normal formalities, Mayor, with the invocation and all that good
I'll
stuff.
make sure there wasn't anything you needed addressed before we started that I was gonna ask our very Reverend Edward McDowell from McDowell Way to maybe bless the meeting before we start.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. From McDowell, South Carolina. Gracious Creator, for your loving kindness, for your tender mercy that showers each of us every day, for life, health, and strength, for the simple ability to get up this morning. It's not our doing, but yet your doing. Allow us to sense your spirit. Anoint us with your guidance as we push forward to set a fiscal year. Touch us individually and yet collectively, reminding us that it's not us, but it's you, Lord. For your grace and your mercy, and for all of the graduating seniors, we pray blessings upon each of them as they move forward in their respective careers. We ask it, we claim it, in the mighty and precious name of him who gives us grace. Amen.
So, Mayor and Council, thank you for your time, and we're about to embark on the last stretch of the budget process. I wanted to give you a memo of a protocol we've established for alerting you to events, and I'm being very specific about this, that rise to the level of something that would pique community interest or impact something that's a big deal going on. We've had a couple of situations recently where I felt like we were trying to get you just a confirmation that something was going on in the community, and that's all that this will be. But what we've now decided to do is to have Harry to send you a text alert for something that rises to that level. Again, it is only confirmation to you that something might be going on that you need to be aware of. It will not have details. It will be preliminary. It will not be the end all. But at least it gives you some confirmation quickly that something might be occurring, and then any follow-up will come from me or Leisha or the chiefs when they're available, but typically they're not going to be available. So we're just trying to get you a little confirmation. I heard you at the retreat ask for that. So that's all that is. And you're welcome. And with that, we'll turn into the budget process for FY 22-23. Thank you, Mayor Rickaman, for pulling us all together and rallying us in the spirit of getting this done over the next few budget workshops. It's very important at this point that Missy, Jeff, and I, working with the assistant city managers and the chiefs and all of our department heads, begin to bring you the information you need to understand the budget. Today, we're going to focus on water and sewer primarily. We'll take you probably through some of the enterprise funds, and then we're going to save the general fund for the upcoming budget workshops that Mayor Rickaman referenced yesterday in an email to you, that we really do need the time with you over the next few Tuesdays to get through all of that, because it's my understanding that you really like to hear on a high level from some of the department heads. tell you that I have met with every single one of them with our team, and we have done the work, and the pencil's been sharpened, and I feel like we are about as good as we're gonna get on some already lean budgets from 2 previous lean budget years. But with that said, particularly with the newly seated council, I think it would be good for you to see how maybe the sausage is made a little bit, give us some additional feedback collectively. But I do think it's very important that it's collective from you at this point, because again, I think I'm gonna present to you our best attempt, because I've heard you say what your strategic priorities are. I've heard you say where we need to attempt to use contract labor, for example, and see where we can maybe eliminate some positions and all that kind of thing. And I think we have done a pretty good job of attempting to do that. But with the general fund, having your input starting on May 17th will be helpful for you, I think, and you know, it may glean something different for me that I haven't found it yet, but we've tried. And so I guess I'm saying all that to say, I think at this point, you know, individual conversations with you all, with your suggestions, I'll always take them, but I feel like y'all need to be around the table to work through it together with us. So that's what's going on for the 17th, and the request for that, which Mayor Rickaman noted that might mean we need to, there's a lot of committee work going on too, which is great. But again, every hour of every workday, we're in between preparing for committees or the budget, and then their committee meetings scheduled, I think, next Tuesday. So we were suggesting, Mayor, that maybe Administrative Policy Committee be rescheduled, and I've asked Reverend McDowell if he's amenable to that.
Yeah, Mayor, that's fine, we can do that. They're one of the subject matters we talked about, we sort of consensually agreed that we not bring it to council. So the other 2 areas, I think we've got ample enough time to get that done.
Of all the time that we have this month. Luckily, we have 5 Tuesdays, so that helps.
We'll just wait until after we're done to schedule another administrative policy.
That'd be great. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir. And so we'll get started with you today with a little bit of overview. Missy will come forward for that. Then we're going to quickly hand off to Jeff and Clint and Frank, and I'll chime in as necessary. One of the things, not so much with the funds we're talking about today, but as we move into the budget discussions next week and thereafter, we remember the schedule, and we'll go over the schedule again at the end, but we have to advertise the budget, a bottom line number. We never advertise more than that by the 23rd, which means we were putting it in the paper to be noticed by the 19th. So again, you all that are newer to this will understand it's more like, you know, the bus is there, but we're gonna be moving people around in the seats on the bus, even as we're advertising the budget. That's just kind of how that typically works, but we'll talk you through it. Missy?
Thank you, Ms. Wilson. Mayor and council, it's good to see you all today. We're glad to be here and be at the point of discussing the proposed budget with you. As Ms. Wilson mentioned, we're going to move through a couple of different topics and a couple of different items today. We have a lot of material to cover, so we're looking forward to some brisk conversations. The first part we really wanted to overview a little bit, and it's highlighted in the memo that you received, just how we developed the budget. And a lot of what we're working through, as Ms. Wilson's mentioned, we've been adapting and adjusting and flexing to, changing priorities, new folks that are here, and bringing folks, trying to help share as much information as possible so everyone is has a little bit base understanding about what makes up the city's budget, what makes up our departments, the services provide, and the cost to provide those services. The budget that's before you today and the budgets that are coming for you at this point do not include any rate increases nor any fee increases. So everything is based on existing rate schedules. Of course, our goal is always to meet City Council's strategic outcome priorities. Those that have recently been adopted or are being adopted by City Council have been certainly on our minds and things that we are working towards and focusing on, and look forward in the coming years to be able to be even more demonstrative of how our budget and how our work meets those objectives and works towards those strategic outcomes. We did work with departments on starting from a zero-based outcome in terms of looking at building their budgets from the ground up. What does it mean to provide the services that they are responsible for providing, as well as meeting those strategic objectives? Of course, a big impact on this year's budget, again, is staffing and hiring capacity in terms of both operating with existing staffing as well as meeting those hiring goals that many of our departments are achieving, and with the work that you all have done to help with regards to adjusting our starting salaries, our minimum salaries rather, up to the $14.5 per hour rate. You'll certainly see that affected in some of the department's budgets going forward, but then also too, what that does in terms of our projections and ability to hire, as well as our other efforts to promote and advertise vacancies. Of course, we always make sure that we keep in mind any prior commitments that we have in prior years in terms of new operations or expanding services, and keep those in the budget as well. And of course, as we all know, we are facing increased costs related to goods and services, supply chain issues, of course, that impact our budget development. Moving right on into the proposed water and sewer budget. We're going to do a little bit of interchange here, but just to start out, first off, as we mentioned, the proposed water and sewer fund budget, we have not proposed any rate increases. So the total projected revenue in the total proposed budget, of course, is $185 million, which is about 1.35% over the current year budget. And of course, we are projecting revenues based on just moderate growth of our system as well as just normal consumption levels. And with that, we're going to turn over for Mr. Palin, Assistant City Manager Palin, to talk about the rate study proposal. The review of the rate study, rather.
Good afternoon. I apologize. I do not have the deep, silky voice that Robert has and brings to our presentations, but I do have some good news, though, so that'll be the offset. Well, that's a good point. Well, we'll bring Robert back and y'all will hear the difference. Or maybe we'll get him on a Zoom call sometime so y'all can. So, however, his firm Black & Veatch did work with staff to put together the rate study. So what we took a look at is our, we always have our base case financial plan, which would be the current year. So in the current year, what we're looking at is still a $40 million CIP that would be enacted. Years 2, 3, 4, and 5 in this study will then show a growth back up to $120 million of CIP. I'll remind, well, it's not a reminder, so I got to remember, this will be new. So we're going to show y'all all 5 years here. This would have been in the handouts on Friday that were emailed out to you. It'll be here, and we can provide a better copy of everything as well. I'm sorry. Email from Friday night.
Yeah, I don't think we got.
Oh, okay. Well,
Yeah, it was in your portal like it always is.
so we will print those out then. This information that's up here today was also part of that. So this will be the rate study. So in the rate study, we're showing you 5 years, but the budget that we're going to be
Thought it was
approving,
awfully quiet over the weekend.
I just thought everyone agreed to everything.
Exactly. After we stay here to 8 o'clock, 9 o'clock at night. That'd be good. it's in front of them now, I don't know.
So most of it's going to be part of what you have as a handout today. It might be in a little bit different format. There might be some additional stuff. But I really want to point on the rate study for the current upcoming year. The only thing that y'all will be voting on to approve is just year one, which is 2003, our fiscal year. These are just projections, the upcoming 2004, 25, 26, and 27. It's for informational purposes, so you can see what the future looks like potentially. But as a reminder, we update that every year. Okay, so I can't point. So some of the things that we take a look at, I've mentioned this year will be the $40 million. It'll be $120 million CIP each year going forward. As we go through this briefly, I'll point out some of the important, I'll say, statistics that we look at each year. Water and sewer systems nationwide have certain, yeah, so when we get to, let's see if it's going to show it on this one.
Shows the cash part of the CIP. Usually we do 80% bond and 20% cash.
I may not have it on this sheet. It's on everything that went out on Friday. And I'll email everything out to y'all.
It's in front, they have it, Jeff. Isn't this in front of council? Yeah, it's right in front of you, your packet is there.
It may not show the,
Olive, yeah.
okay. It's not going to show it up here, the 120. 120 is what starts in 2024, so we'll hand those out. But in 2023, we're looking at only spending $40 million on CIP. The top here, under 2023, we have listed total expected revenues. This is based upon what was budgeted last year, what the expectations are for the current year, and staff worked with Robert Chambers, and they've come up with their expected revenues for the current year. So you'll see lines 1 and 2 total up for our total revenue expectations. On line 4, we have a 0% increase, so we're not adding any additional revenue from an increase. Line 10 is your total adjustments to revenue. So within that number, that's where you have other tap fees, expansion fees, return check fees, also any growth from any of our current customers. We do have a project out there. Interest earnings would be in that number as well. Line 10. Okay, so cash will be reflected when we talk about the capital side. This will just be on the operational side. So we calculate any cash that we have left over at the end of this year. That'll be what goes towards part of that 40 million CIP. Yes, sir. So the number's still right around 16 million, but that's the entire system. Right now, we're pulling together to take a look at how much of that is remaining from the entire program, how much of that is penalties and charges. That basically hit our system's financials more this past year than it did in the current, because we're still trying to collect it from the prior year. The collections that we bring on that, in through that, and we've been talking with the mayor, and we're taking a look at a program to try to encourage those collections. We'll actually add cash to the system and to our bottom line. Yes, sir. So if we bring in between now and any time, I'll just say between now and December. If $5 million comes in, we can adjust the CIP. Changes on that, though, we'll be bringing back to y'all to talk to about. But until we actually see a change in that number, we just don't have it recognized yet. After revenues, we have our operating expense for the system. That gives us our net revenue after operations. Line 14 is the outstanding debt service. And unfortunately, y'all don't have all the schedules because it went out Friday as well. So the debt service schedules?
That's everything.
Oh, okay. So there's a complete breakdown in there of every bond issue that we have and what's outstanding in both principal and interest, what years it pays. And later on today, we're also just going to show you a summary for each fund of that debt service. So existing debt service is $45 million. We still have to issue that $89 million bond. We will not be issuing that until this fall. When we do that, our estimate for the interest cost for the year would be the $2,948,000. That is in line 15. So that gives us a total debt service of $48,309,000. That leaves, now we'll start talking about CIP. That leaves us with about $16 million that we will fund of that $40 million CIP out of operations. We have other transfers and expenditures that occur of $6.9 million.
16 doesn't include any cash carried forward, right?
That's correct. That's correct. That's just out of the operation. That is only out of the current revenue, so out of the total $185 million. We have other capital outlay that occurs just throughout the system. Outside of our regular, when we say CIP, we're really talking about all the projects that are brought to y'all. Other capital that's purchased during the year, things, what would I use as an example? Vehicles, things like that. We don't use that out of our capital lease. That's paid directly out of water and sewer. So those are that's what those items there are.
Jeff, that's essentially everything.
Listed out, yes.
Yeah.
And you're going to review later the projects that are in your projected
Yes.
16 million?
Clint will be here to talk and Frank, to go through all the projects.
You may have updated this just very slightly since Friday. Because your numbers are, so we can print this for council.
Yeah, we'll update that then.
So which one is the numbers that we should be following?
The only difference is going to be that 2 million number right there. I would look at this, and I'll send it all back out to y'all.
Will that have the detail on the transfers, other expenditures, and the capital outlay?
What I have does not, but we can provide all of that. So in the past, when Robert is here, especially in years of an increase, he provides a lot more broken out detail because everyone wants to know why we're going to pay a 7 or 8, 9% increase.
Jeff, I heard Will's question about the projects. that
Yes, sir.
are Funded by the CIP. Is it also going to show you the $80 million we're not going to fund? Second question is, I see you have 0 increase this year, 7.69, 7.75, 7.22. Do you have any calculation if we did have an increase this year, what those would go down to?
So it would change. So if we had an increase this year, it would depend upon were we doing a 40, 80, or $120 million. I believe we can pull up those scenarios, but I can't provide that today.
Robert usually shows us if you don't have an increase, it impacts you in future years because you have to have an increase. If you keep it minimum amount of increase, it's easier in out years.
He initially provided showing a 120, an 80, and a 40. Since that time, we have refined a lot of numbers, but we can get back with him to update the 80 and the 120 with the refined numbers, and we can bring that back to y'all as well. And then it will reflect the increases and the changes going through years two through 5.
So Jeff, this combined system slide that is in the PowerPoint in front of council is the most current version of it.
Yes.
Okay, so you all should be following what's in your PowerPoint combined system. The information we sent Friday also had it, but it's just very basic changes that have occurred since Friday. It's the same thing, but y'all have it. You have the most updated version in your PowerPoint.
And then this one is just it broken down even more?
Yes. That's the actual budget.
These scenarios here, this is the rate study that Jeff is showing you now with some additional information behind it. It's in your packet that was in there Friday.
No, but I can't even like participate immediately.
We got several weeks, so final decisions are not made today. And y'all all know Missy's email address. Just send her everything.
Yeah, no, it's the same thing that's in your PowerPoint.
Yeah, what she just handed out is in the PowerPoint, and there's an additional page that I have on there as well. So if you look at the very bottom, line 21, you'll see debt service coverage ratio. So over the years, that is an important number when we discuss issuing bonds with our rating agencies. We deal with Standard & Poor's and Moody's. We typically target 2.0. That doesn't mean actuals turn out to that. Some years they're more, some years they're a little less, but we try to target a 2.0. That is kind of the average number that's out there for most AA rated agencies, so we try to keep in that same frame. You'll see on here for 2023, the number's a little lower, 1.72. I talk to our bankers often. I'm on that first page. It's on row 21. Just talking about the debt service coverage. It says at the bottom. However, at the end of the 5-year plan, it does get us back up to the 2.0.
Where does this put us with our cease and desist order? I'll be able to speak to that in the CIP portion and where we stand in terms of compliance with the consent decree. I just need a short answer, right? We are in compliance, if we get. When do we finish?
Clint.
I mean, I'm looking at this and I'm seeing this escalation. Just curious as to when.
Yes, sir. The projected departure was around the year 2028. We believe because of COVID and the request for more time that we've made, that probably pushes to 2030. But as we've spoken about before, it really centers around stopping sanitary sewer overflows, executing the project, stopping the sanitary sewer overflows. And that will dictate really when we could ultimately get rid of it. Or
Okay,
get
then
out
let me
from
ask it a
underneath.
different way then.
Yes,
At what
sir.
point do we ever reach a point where we're not borrowing this much money ongoing and ongoing and ongoing?
So I think what you see with the $120 million capital spend is the need to play a little bit of catch-up for decades of work that needs to be done to replace aging infrastructure. And so as long as we've got that consent decree hanging and those requirements, that we're going to have an escalated spend. When that is removed, I would envision that 120 would be able to drop down to some degree. Now, thinking about the time value of money, 120 may not mean the same thing 10 years from now that it does now, so.
Okay, but I mean, here's, on a maintenance, when you get to a maintenance CapEx position, will it continually be almost 80% of revenue?
Hopefully not, but I think you're going to continue to see us as we unwind the consent decree, we're gonna need to step up a little bit of investment in the water system, in the drinking water system, replacing aging infrastructure there. So I think you're.
Well, I think we all understand that looking forward, 7+% rate increases just it's not sustainable. I mean, so what happens?
Well, we review our financials every year. We do the rate study every year. Jeff, I don't want to speak out of turn. In general, those numbers come back. The financial performance is better than the projection, but you never know for sure. And,
I mean, okay.
and if we didn't have a consent decree hanging over our head that's mandating,
No, that's why I'm asking the question. I mean, at some point, you got to bring this thing to an end or something, because, I mean, where does the light, I would encourage you, before we finish this process, to come back with a little bit longer-term plan, so we get a feel for when we're out of this consent decree deal and can move away from even projecting these type rate increases. I mean, this is an issue. I mean,
You will never get to a point where you don't have to have rate increases because of the increase of everything going into the system. The cost of pipe, cost of people, cost of borrowing money. And there's a good reason why we borrow money for a utility system. You got your.
Howard, do you understand? A couple of things for what it's worth.
Teach me.
Number one, 7% is not sustainable, period. In any kind, you're gonna raise the water rate increases 7%, you're compounding that thing, and it ain't pretty. Number two, if we can grow our economy here and get new investment and more water usage, that will do it. Well, when you're not growing your economy and you're having to raise the level on just the same people every year to cover your maintenance costs, you're correct. It goes up. So, I'm just telling you, this right here.
I think in our utilities, we are growing our utilities. Look at what we're going to Wednesday when we go out to, is it Wednesday we go out to White Claw? That's a pretty big utility
Thursday.
user right now.
they're a fantastic customer.
I think
Okay.
we're growing our utilities.
Is that budgeted in here?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
So when we're talking about a revenue increase of next year of, or between 23, what would it be? I don't have 22, so. What's the water bill for White Claw?
So,
Should be a million or more a year, right?
Oh, yes, sir. They projected $1 million a month water and sewer
That's
bill.
$12 million.
But we're not seeing that, so we've had to, that
it
was the
six?
capacity they asked for. No, so right now, we're probably looking at about $2.5 million a year. We think that's gonna grow it to $3.5 or $4 million
Okay.
a year, so.
So
it's
if I
good
look at
growth.
22's projected revenue, it would be $3 million less than what you got here, probably.
Yes, sir, I think so. I think that's correct. I guess the other point to,
Well,
to
then I
make-
would just take that and say to Howard, in a nice way, that's why we gotta recruit more.
Well, I agree with you. I'm all for recruiting.
I
We
just one
gotta
other
run the
point.
system that we've got.
In terms of just rate
Tell the senior
increases,
citizens that, Howard.
this will be the second year out of 3 where we will have not had a rate increase. So that speaks a little bit to slower, more incremental, but that's just a data point for you. 2 out of 3, we would not have had a rate increase.
Understand, just want to be on the record as we go through this thing that those are gonna be real problematic going forward.
They would be smaller if we have a little one this year.
No comment.
So on some of that, just looking at least through the first 5 years, we do start to increase the amount of cash and less bonds. I'm trying to see if y'all go to the handout. If you go to, there's a page called Sources and Uses. This would just be on the 4-page handout that Missy handed y'all last. Should say Combined System Sources and Uses. And if you see that under 2023, the transfer in from the operating, there's the 16 million, and that's what we reflected on the screen up here. And then using cash out of the system is 24 million. And then that's paying for the entire 40 million of the CIP. If you go to years 24, 2025, 2026, and 2027, you'll see total CIP there is 120 million. But you'll also notice, now, I need everyone to remember, these are estimates going forward or projections. So when me or Robert or Clint or someone else is talking to y'all next year, there'll always be an adjustment to some degree on these. But ideally, in 2024, we'll be utilizing more cash, which means we'll issue less bonds. By the time we reach 2027, we'll be ideally looking at spending 43 million out of cash. You know, it's not huge increases, but over time, those start to move that way.
Jeff,
Yes, sir.
of course, I've got to ask this question. Go back to your 2023 with a CIP of 40 mil,
Yes, sir.
correct? No increase. 2024 represents 7.69 increase. 120, am I reading that right? 120 million CIP?
Yes, sir.
All right, let's ask the obvious question. Any rate increase, of course, gives me some heartburn, particularly for our citizens. We've not had a rate increase in how many years, Jeff?
We did have one this past year of 5.02%, and the year before we had 0.
How does that, in a holistic way, affect the residents of our city? I know it's hard to answer that question now. But I think we've got to be sensitive enough to know that there are persons now struggling with that very issue, a water increase. Somewhere down the road, and I think Robert, of course, is he coming today or tomorrow or whenever?
No, sir.
All right.
We all missing Robert.
Yeah, I'm missing Robert because I need to know.
Don't take offense, Jeff.
Because I need to know how is that going to exponentially affect our residents and particularly our constituents. That's an issue for us. That's been an issue that we've talked about for years. Shouldn't say talked about it for years, but there has always not been a common sheet of paper that all of us sung off of. Will we get to that? Jeff?
So let me answer it this way, and then you tell me if I've answered it. So in the past, when we've had a rate increase, Robert has brought and showed y'all an example of the bill. And we've taken the average bills and we've put a value out there. In addition to that, customer service staff has had didn't we have a modeling, a sample bill online that people could go to and put a number in? So it would show you the effect on your bill. So we did not show that this year because we're showing you a 0 increase for right now. When we do the updates next year,
2024.
yes, when we do the updates in future years, if there's rate increases, then we would bring and show you the changes in those bills.
I'm very comfortable with that, and for saying to folk, no, there will not be a rate increase
Yes.
in 23. But down the road, and I think perhaps Mr. Taylor is getting at that, I think. We cannot afford in 2024 to raise rates on folk who are having difficulty paying that crap. Paying it now. And if we don't do that, then we've got to really have a genuine, on the table conversation about rate increase. Because we're looking at a 120 mil CIP in 2024. And that's going to hurt our citizens. No question about it.
Can I ask just a clarifying question? What is the difference between the operating revenue and operating fund again? Those two numbers?
Which,
When we're looking at what adds up to become the CIP funding,
it's a good question. So operating revenue, that 16 million is 16 million that's actually generated in the current year's revenue structure.
okay.
And then the 24 million, Robert calls that the operating fund. In general, we may just call it the fund balance, but that's cash.
Like,
that's
still
sitting
there.
out there, and so we're bringing that in.
So
Well,
that's-
it's gonna be,
Sorry, I just wanted to clarify. So that's essentially what Joe is saying, the cash that's already there, that we're then moving forward.
That's correct.
Okay.
And just for clarification, as Robert and them are doing rate studies, are they accounting for the empty positions that we have? Are they accounting for potential cash that's being transferred out? How are they looking at that rate structure as well? I mean, I think understanding a little bit about those details, because we have had significant positions emptied in that, and that, you know, depending on how we move forward, will also be reflective.
So a lot of what you brought up would affect the operating expense back on the prior page, the $101 million. So many of the changes that Frank and Clint will talk to y'all about, I don't know if that's today, might have put them on the spot, but a lot of the changes, as y'all have been meeting and discussing, the things that they're working on are reflected in 2023.
But these are scenarios. So even though Robert isn't here today, and we'll potentially get him in, I mean, I'm not sure that we'll have Robert come before you would approve the budget for this year, but these are just scenarios, as we know.
Oh, yeah.
As we know, this is.
Make sure we're
I
accounting
just
for
wanted to
stuff,
make
because
sure
we need
all
to
the-
make sure we're seeing it all.
Yeah,
That's
this, because you see something shown in 2024 as an increase or 2025, that you're not approving that as you're discussing this budget.
And I did
Well, of
mention that early on in the beginning, so maybe Robert says it differently than me, but our focus is 2023. These are very good questions, though, about what happens long-term. But I'd also remind, when we do a rate study update every single year, so we can take the most recent actuals and then project them forward.
well, I certainly don't want to be presumptuous, not at all. But I also think that it's important for us to understand that 2023 is zero. 2020, and that's with a CIP of 40 mil. 2024 represents 120 million CIP. It's going to affect some folk, and of course, that's where I am right now. I don't want to be presumptuous enough to say that when I meet with a community, water rates are down. But 2024 is going to be the advent of what takes place the next 4 years. And we need to be bold enough to say, I supported that, and I'm with that. I think Robert's input as it relates to rates is very important, I think.
Right. Can we get,
And I'm sorry for that.
no, we got a lot to cover today, and I want to make sure we get it, because it's going to be very important for us to get through today, because there's going to be a lot more detail over the next couple of weeks.
So can I add one more thing on this page, and then we'll move on? I'll call this the positive spin on a few things. So we're very focused, and Councilman asked a question about other revenue and also talked about economic growth. That number can have a huge impact on what next year's rate increase ends up being. We have a very, what I'll call, conservative number on growth from our industry in next year's number. If we see growth from White Claw, maybe even Juicy, they may be maxed out, and some of the others, that number will actually go up, which means the amount that we have to see revenues increase will go down. We did see a substantial impact, I can't remember, I'll go back and look, but we saw a substantial impact a few years ago when Juicy came online, it helped lower it. So that has the potential to offset it next year on that number. Another reason why it's important for us to do the updates. Because we'll know when we're sitting here talking to you this time next year, how much more they've grown, and do we have new industry that's come in and adding to the bottom line?
Jeff, let me ask you something. Just residential growth out in the county in the northeast, towards Lower Richland, is that moving the meter at all that you can tell?
I'm going to say
Because we're
yes,
just talking
but
industry here.
He's going to give you
And
gallons.
if that comes later, you can dive into more detail then.
No, sir, it is, I think we have probably reflected that very conservatively in our growth. I think 1% customer growth is what we bake in for each year. We're seeing a lot better growth in that these last few months. We don't want to be overly aggressive because there could be a downturn in that growth. So we've continued with that same projection throughout of the 1%.
For the residential.
Residential, yes, sir.
Good explanation, thanks.
And I would add any growth that occurs and has occurred and reflects, so when we update the numbers next year, any of the past growth, Robert and me, Missy, staff, we work on giving them the actuals so that that type of growth will reflect from anything that occurred. Because we have gone out, probably say a little conservative at 1%. Is that what we're using now? But if we come up short, then y'all will not be happy. One of the last parts for me to talk to y'all about, often people talk about what's the total cash of the system. If you go to the probably last page of the last handout that came to you, this is kind of a projected flow of funds throughout the whole system for 2023, the upcoming year. And you'll see where we have $293 million. So that's kind of an estimate of where we'll be at the end of this year. So if you take a look in the CAFR, or now called the ACFR, you're going to see a number. It's never going to tie directly to that, but if you take a look at your total cash throughout the balance sheet, it's going to be a number somewhere in that frame. What will be coming out of that will be the $24 million that we've talked about. That'll be going towards CIP. We'll be adding back into it the $6,625,000. That's actually coming out of operations. So that is a water and sewer accounting item. I would personally net that out and just say that's coming out of the current year's operations towards CIP, but it just gets moved around. But you'll be able to tie that back to this page out here. That gives you an
Excuse me, is it coming into water and sewer or coming out of water and sewer?
So the $6,625,000 is coming into, that's still part of the operations, so that goes back into the fund balance. So you have an ending balance of 275. Throughout the industry, they like to say, what's that standard of days on hand for cash versus operations? So that's 988 days. That is a very positive effect when we talk to the rating agencies. Rating agencies are always interested in what's the cash on hand. So that's going to be in the ballpark when we finish out and talk to them in the fall. They'll be pulling a number similar to this based upon our actual financials and how they end up this year.
So the 275 is the cash on hand that you would report?
Yes. Well, actually, at the end of this year, it'd be closer to the 293.
Okay.
But then during this upcoming year, you'll see the 24 million going out, 6 million coming in, so that nets out the 275.
The 504, beside the minimum balance requirement, is the number of days expressed in that.
Yes, sir. So 504 is really 138% of operating cash. So we've taken the question becomes, why do you talk about that number? So Brent Robertson spoke with y'all several years ago, looking at all of Moody's statistics of AA rated agencies, and we took a look at what's their typical cash on hand. And that number was at about 138%, 139%. So that would be the number we would want, is the 140. So I will point out, because everyone's going to say, whoa, our ending balance is much higher than the 140. So the one thing that isn't subtracted out of that 275 is all of our encumbrances and ongoing projects that are out there. When you take all of that out, including the projects that are coming out, then if you liquidated, had everything that went through, it's really more theoretical, you'd have 47,774,000. That is 171 days worth of cash. And the typical just industry standard, not looking at it from whether you're a single A or a triple A, is 180 days cash on hand. So the 171 keeps it close to that ballpark. And if you kind of flow forward to 2027, you see the target actually ends up getting right to about 180.
And the construction fund is the same thing as a CIP?
Yes. So we will have projects that have started several years ago that are ongoing. We have projects that were approved this past year, and then the projects that will be approved in the upcoming year.
And then when you look at the more like by line water and sewer operating fund, what number in this combined system matches with the breakdown of how each of these things are spent? And I'm looking at the Fund 551.
The memo, the documents in the back where it has the different allocations. So that total budget, ultimately, you see where it lines up to the 185 million on the Fund 551.
So it says proposed is 186,653.
Okay? So. Found that on the page.
Social.
There's not a, sorry, there's not a number, but it's the one that says Water and Sewer Operating Fund 551 at the top.
So under, the way that translates to this combined cash system on the rate study is reflecting under, probably the closest line would be line 1, where it totals 185.8 million. I'm sorry, line 11,
Yeah, I was like, line one, okay.
line 11. Then all the items below that, starting from line 12 through line 21, those all add back up to the 100. That's the closest way to sort of translate those. Mr. Palin said that's all he has with the rate study, so unless y'all have some questions for him, we'll proceed through the rest of the discussion.
Reserve the right to question the witness in the future.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
I heard you say that Robin will eventually make a presentation.
Yes, sir, I do think we anticipate some additional conversations. Robert's still around, so yes.
That's within the time parameters of approving the budget.
No, sir, but he's not, there's no rate proposals, there's no rate increases being proposed, so he was not anticipating to be presenting.
Futuristically, though, in 24, there will be.
Oh, absolutely,
Absolutely.
absolutely. And of course, these scenarios will change by then. Right, since you're just proposing, since today you're just, for this budget purposes, you are only looking at the 2023.
I thought he was going to do futuristic, think with a futuristic start at 2024. But I'm saying,
We'll have him, I mean, for the sake of time, to be honest, Reverend McDowell, we've been working with Robert, but the staff has put this together based on his feedback. It was really us giving him feedback that, you know, we didn't anticipate there would be the stomach for a rate increase this year. So, Robert probably was pushing back. I don't know if you would have wanted to hear Robert right now, to be honest with you, but we will get Robert in front of you all for next go-round. Yes, sir.
So once we've discussed the rates or the revenues that make up the water and sewer system, expenditure-wise, of course, the proposed budgets for the operating portion of the budgets departments, they represent 104 million. That's about a $2.5 million increase over current year budget. the focus of their budget development, this would be reflective of the departments that make up the operating budgets, primarily the largest, of course, being utilities. Utilities budget reflects the operations of two water plants, our wastewater plant, plus our collection line and distribution lines. That means the water and sewer line, maintenance of the water and sewer lines, as well as meter reading and other functions.
And you said the departments that make up this budget is what, utility, public works?
Engineering, those are by far the largest. Of course, we also have customer care is included in here, GIS functions. Some general government includes our finance, the finance folks that are charged proportionally to water and sewer.
Public safety? and-
Public safety is actually that's the security that is provided at the water maintenance, water plants, the two water plants, the wastewater plant, and the public works facilities. They are actually managed, they're managed by the police department, so it's under public safety.
Okay. And economic development?
Economic development is out of our water and sewer fund, the economic development department.
It does not include public works as far as the total public works.
No, it's not the total public works budget. I'm sorry, that's correct. Thank you, sir. It reflects the division that is charged to water and sewer out of public works is street divisions, and it refers to the folks that are patching the repairs once
But
water and sewer
that's
has made
less-
the repairs.
That's less than previous years, correct, with the small?
Yes, and the biggest,
contractor use?
there are more contract use in the utility, reflected in the utility budget. Public Works, you're seeing a reduction there, in part because of some capital outlays, some vehicle equipment that they didn't need to purchase this year.
And the general government and the transfers to other funds were exactly what now?
So general government includes administrative functions.
Can you just give the detail on, some, a memo
It's
on detail?
in the packet that you receive, there's some information regarding administration, customer care, finance, and GIS management, as well as general services. Those are those what make up general government. We just had those collapsed for reporting purposes.
So when I look at this where it says the Assistant City Manager's Office, that's a general government expense?
Yes, sir. It's just a collapse for the purposes here. Of course, and then debt service is 48 million, and Mr. Palin, again, will come back up soon and go through a debt service schedule, and we'll talk through the water and sewer debt program.
Is that where you wanted Clint to maybe jump in and give any highlights specifically?
I was going to say, if Clint, Mr. Shealy, right.
Have any slides per se, but.
Right.
but being that we're gonna be bringing department heads for general fund, starting, as I said, next week. The only other departments here, it wouldn't be general fund, but you might wanna hear about would be utilities and engineering, and since Clint's here, I don't know if there's any highlights you wanted to just give them off the top of your head.
Can I just ask one more question about the transfers or just a general question? On specific project cost, like I say, if I looked at Bull Street, for example, historical, there were monies taken out of water and sewer, I guess, to put water and sewer lines in for there. Correct. All right. When you talk about the CIP cost here, is that exclusively for water and sewer lines, or does that include other projects outside of specifically water and sewer?
Absolutely. It is water and sewer projects specifically. Mr. Sheila will go through this coming year's CIP list specifically with water projects and wastewater projects, and we have a historical
How
list.
about outside, how about projects outside of specifically water and sewer?
Then we also have a stormwater fund. You'll see those stormwater projects in the stormwater fund. There are no parking.
okay, let me ask you-
So no other projects outside of water and sewer would be in the water and sewer CIP.
Okay. So in a discussion, this was a general discussion, somebody that had at one point in time, there was a mention about something on perhaps a shortage on another project somewhere that could be funded out of water and sewer. There's none of that in this.
The only time that
Not
would
in the
happen, right.
proposed CIP. Not in the proposed 40 million.
course, the only time, if there was a shortage on a water and sewer project, it would be funded by another water
I
and
just
sewer
wanted, I
project.
just, you know.
So just a quick overview about some of the priorities that we have in terms of our operating budgets and some of the things that we've, are looking to do this coming year. And I'm gonna have Frank come up and speak specifically and share a few things about utility operations. Because as you look at that breakdown, utility operations is the largest expenditure, followed by debt service. So, the overall operating budget, and I'll speak to customer care first. I think you know what we've done with our customer care center recently, ramping up our hiring effort, not increasing staffing levels, but moving the staff to be working when the majority of the calls are coming in. And I hope you've seen through the use of the after-hours answering service for more emergency calls and putting the resources during the day, I hope that each of you have seen a reduction in the frustrated customer calls that I can't get through, I can't get anybody to respond or answer. So I think Tiffany Latimer and her team have done an exceptional job of approaching best-in-class service for a call center. So we're really, really proud of that. And the statistics that we update you monthly would show that in terms of average call handling time. In engineering, we have actually collapsed 5 positions. A lot of our graduate level engineers that are coming out, our younger engineers, know how to do their own drafting work. So as they're designing something, a sidewalk or a water line or whatever, the old model when I went through engineering school was I would do the design calculations and hand it to a draft person and they would do the AutoCAD work. Now the younger folks are doing their own. And so we don't need as many of those drafting positions. And so we've been able to kind of reposition and look at our staffing level and collapse 5 positions in engineering to be a little more efficient as we move forward. And in utility operations, obviously regulatory compliance with our consent decree of paramount importance for us, maintaining water quality to our customers, making sure that they're not experiencing discolored water or taste and odor, those sorts of things, very, very important. I'm going to let Frank talk about how he assessed the staffing levels in a couple of our different operating divisions that report through him and some of the work that he's done where we've got areas of significant vacancies and what we're asking for in this year's budget. And I'd be remiss if I didn't say thank you for letting us do some salary adjustments for our field staff. I think every one of them would say thank you very much, and the next time you see them, I hope they'll tell you thank you on a face-to-face basis because they are very, very appreciative of what you've done for them. Frank, will you speak a little bit about utility operations, and then we'll talk about capital improvement?
As Frank's coming up in the materials that were sent, that I know you may not have seen that, he'll probably touch upon, which I really appreciate Frank's diligence and Clint on, just really sharpening that pencil with us to look at positions that we eliminated, about 56 positions going into this budget process and looking at the use of the contractors.
Right, and Council Mayor, Ms. Wilson, thank you for your time today. As we've been discussing in the preparation of this year's budget, we were looking for places to save money. So we literally pulled out the organizational charts for places like water distribution, wastewater maintenance, the wastewater treatment plant, and looked at positions that were vacant. Then it was kind of a thumbnail sketch. What do we reasonably think we can fill this year? And then what do we reasonably think would remain vacant this year? And by doing that, we were able to identify roughly 24 positions in water distribution. That represents a 20% vacancy. We think that's going to save somewhere in the neighborhood of $1.3 million.
Those are that's you're eliminating, or that's what you think you can fill?
No, those are the ones that we are not budgeting for this year, that we are going to anticipate being vacant this year. We're calling them authorized positions, but not budgeted positions. I would very much like to keep them on the piece of paper for future reference, because it's hard for me to it's hard for me to recommend permanent staff reductions when we're having to turn right around and hire contractors to do work that we should be doing.
Whoa, but that's not a true statement. The part of the issue and the reason why we're talking about hiring contractors is because we're not being able to get the work done in a timely manner with staffing and without. So the charge was, let's take what we do best and let's stay focused on that and fill the gaps where we're not performing. So
Well, that's what I said, Mayor.
Well,
What I'm
That's not
saying
what you
is,
said.
I can't recommend permanent reductions in staff when we're having to hire contractors to do the work that you would reasonably expect us to accomplish when you call us on the phone. Okay? Fixing a water main. We can't get there. We're having to hire a contractor to get there. I don't want to eliminate the positions permanently for the people who would fix that water main when we're having to hire somebody else to do the work. We're hoping that we'll gradually be able to hire people to do that work.
but who said?
We've eliminated 56 positions.
Yeah, I saw that. I think the
Okay?
question
So
is,
when we get to the budget next time, then I hear you, Frank. We'll evaluate it then on if we've been able to make strides without the contract labor, and if we need to add some positions back to get there. But we've eliminated 56 positions from utilities.
yeah, I don't think that's the question. The question is for me is that the purpose of dividing where we're best and where we're not is also about cost effectiveness, and everything else, which hiring people, if you look at the overall scheme for certain positions and reoccurring work, doesn't make sense. And that was my point, is that's
Won't know
why.
that till we get through a year and see what we can do with the positions that we've reduced.
Mayor, we are going to
Can I
identify
raise
what's
my
the most
hand?
cost-effective way to do it.
Can I raise my hand and be acknowledged in the proper manner, Mayor?
Yes.
What I wanted to add to this discussion too is we have to understand how many of our small construction companies come out of the city as prior employees. So I do believe we need to make sure that we keep a good number of employees because I think that we just want to make sure that the industry doesn't become limited to a core group of people with no expansion. A lot of these folks get a lot of experience here at the city. They work here 10 years, and they go and start other companies. I don't have a problem with that. But if we only let existing companies do this work for an extended period of time, we're limiting our small local contractors who we then need to compete for work. So I'm looking at it from both ways. We don't want to totally eliminate these positions, not unless we see in the future that we don't have the capacity to do them.
And I would like to add, we are going to take a look at what's the most cost-effective way to get this work done. I was presupposing in my statement that it's less expensive to do it with our folks than to hire a contractor. But we'll see. We'll see. We're going to develop that information. So anyway, we repeated this process in wastewater maintenance at the Metro wastewater plant, and we're able to identify some cost savings by not budgeting for some personnel positions this year. Any questions or concerns?
Question. All right. For example, if I'm looking at our vacancies, say as of March 30th, and utility operations, we had 182 FTE vacant spots. So you're talking about reducing, you had a total of 450 budgeted, 268 filled, 182 vacant. So for the F-23 budget, you're talking about what
380.
numbers?
380.
The particularly in water distribution and maintenance, the area where we identified some positions that we weren't going to fill, there are roughly 100 positions. We've got about 33 of those filled right now. We're saying that even if we do a great job hiring, we're not going to fill all 100 jobs. So we pulled 25 out of that, hoping to add about, what's left, 30 some odd positions over the next year. I can get the organizational charts out.
No, I'm just looking at the numbers, Frank. I mean, if we're down 182 total in the utility operations, and we budgeted 450 this year, are you saying you're gonna reduce the total budget number by 56? So you
Yes, sir.
cut it from a total of 450 down to 394?
Yes, sir, roughly.
Okay. I mean, I kind of want to follow up on the mayor a little bit. I mean, if we're able to effectively contract stuff out, I mean, do you think it's to our advantage to hire up and do it internally? Can we do it? Is it cheaper? Is it better to have to pay for those folks all the time, even if we don't need them?
I believe so.
Or,
Partly because, like I said, we're gonna prove this. It's not just gonna be Frank's opinion. We'll get the numbers. But my experience has been, we can fix a broken water main or repair a fire hydrant for less money with our forces than we can to hire a contractor to do it. I'm also presupposing that we are going to have broken water mains going forward. There's gonna be a steady supply.
Well, if you could figure out how not to have them, I would be highly appreciative.
I'll let
Get you the
Clint
Nobel
get back up here and talk about the CIP again. But, so that kind of factors into my belief, plus what I've seen at other utilities. You need to have a certain level of staffing.
just a curious question. I mean, if we were down 182 folks and we've reduced the backlog from what, 7,000 down to 3,500 or so now?
Contractors are helping us reduce that
I know, but my point is, then if you're able to cut it in half with 182 less people, why do we need to go back up to 130 more people? I mean, I'm not saying you get rid of I mean, you don't rehire all those folks.
Yeah,
But
I
to
would,
me, it seems like, I mean, you know,
well, I would say in this climate, the chances of hiring all those people even
but I
is
understand,
small.
I think your chances of hiring in this current climate are probably not as good as you think they are. My question is not chances of hiring, is why are you hiring?
Because we think we can do it for less money than hiring a contractor. Ultimately, we think it'll cost the city less money to do the work with our people.
Let me say this as well, Frank. There are certain services, the calls in the middle of the night, that we need to have a nucleus of folks there. The 33 that we got in water distribution is simply not enough. We know we need more. We need more bodies. We recognize we don't need as many that were on the books, so we're trimming back on that. We're asking for the budget to fund somewhere in between. If we can't fill, then we're gonna have to use those funds to hire even more contractors to make sure the work gets done and to eat the backlog. So we've been employing the contractors to eat the backlog. Going from 7,000 to 3,500 was cleaning up a lot of work orders that just had not been closed. We didn't fix 3,500 active leaks. I wish we would, but that's just not, that's cleaning up data as well, coupled with fixing some active leaks. So that's very, very important. We also are increasing the funding in this budget for our contractors. So we've gone up on that base level of contracting use, and then hoping that we can supplement, add to our staff, supplement with contractors, and further eat into that backlog. That's how we solve that more immediate problem. And then we collect data on what is it costing that contractor and what is it costing us to pay that staff, that crew, fixing that leak, but carrying that employee year-round. We're capturing all
Let me
those
ask you
costs.
this.
and
So
we do that analysis.
we've talked several times about, are there ways that we can incentivize people private contractors who are installing things and connecting things to do the work that we normally send out to do, to reduce perhaps the number of folks that we would need? Is any of that taken into account with this?
I believe it is with water meter installations.
You gotta say, you know it is.
Well, okay. I don't want to be
Hey, I ran a state agency. When you say I believe it is, that usually means it isn't. You know what I'm saying? So,
It is, yes, sir.
Okay.
We've tried to think that way.
Well, I think we're in a circular conversation. Yeah, we are. Yeah, okay, so the reason why is we eliminated, I'm gonna say it one more time, 56 positions, and that's what we've done. And if you come back and you can prove your point, Frank, this time next year, then we're gonna reevaluate it then. But coming out the gate saying what, I don't dispute what Frank is saying, because he's the expert along with Clint. But I think where we are right now is that we're going to try it this way, this year. And then we're gonna have the data to say what's most cost effective and how many more positions we need, Ms. Wilson, to recommend to council in next year's budget.
Sounds good.
It's not about the circular nature of what we're saying to prove the point, really, because we're presenting you a budget where we've eliminated 56 positions, and we're gonna lean into the contractors right now and see how that works for us.
Frank, when y'all demonstrated City Works to Mr. Brennan and I, it showed that on a typical project you'd send out to do a repair of a fire hydrant or whatever, and you would send the crew out, that when the City Works closed out that particular work order, it showed you the total cost involved. The salaries, the supplies and everything for that particular project. Do we have a similar thing for the private contractors? Can you compare a fire hydrant replacement with a crew versus a fire hydrant replacement on contract?
Yes, sir, that's the information that we're developing.
Okay.
And we are trying as hard as we can to refine the contractor process to push that price down.
Are they
Okay.
using City Works?
I think we record the work they do in City Works so that it's captured for our mapping, but we've got contracts in place with them. It's measured through contract.
I have one more question, just as a general question, because when you budget personnel costs to a department, and this may be for the city manager, how are you accounting for the benefit cost charged to that department or whatever? I mean, are you just charging the paycheck into it? Are we charging the leave? Are we charging the?
We have to charge the fringe.
I know, that's what I'm saying.
and the
What-
benefit cost, the percentage this year, I mean, because we've had to factor in an increased healthcare costs going in that we think we can cover based off, funds that we've been saving, so to speak. But I don't know if Pam or Denise know that percent that we add to the personnel.
What's the overhead
Can you
burden?
share with us what the percentage cost is?
35.
35?
And in our budgeting, we have a number of positions, annual rate, and then our budget spreadsheet has all the overhead items broken out in different columns, and it automatically fills in to get the gross amount on the far end.
One of those missing. The ones we said we weren't gonna get the weeds with.
The
Just an
B2B, I
example of a
didn't-
B2B. Yeah, we'll show it to you. It calculates it down to the penny.
To your answer, yes, sir. The budgets that you see for personnel reflect both base salaries as well as the fringe cost that the city pays on behalf of that employee.
Okay, but
Fringe
is there an
taxes.
escalator on that, or you just use a flat 35%?
No, it's per associated cost. So FICA has the rate for insurance, the rate for retirement, which is running, at this point, I have not been told of a rate increase for retirement, but 16.5% or somewhere in there, they were there for state retirement. We have a rate for health insurance.
So that could
unemployment.
change, like, it could be like 37% based on some of those rates changing.
It does. There is, what makes up fringes, some are flat fees and then some are percentages of the salary. Like FICA, Medicare, and then retirement are percentages of salary.
Thank you.
And that is an opportunity, I think, to talk about what makes up departments' budgets. So every employee's budget, every division's budget for personnel includes their base salaries plus their fringes. Operating costs include services and supplies, and where applicable, it will include capital, which would be capital outlays for vehicles or equipment. Those things that are unit price of $5,000 or above but not project-related. It's purely capital outlays. For city budgets, primarily, there's going to be vehicles, sometimes some technology. So moving into the proposed stormwater fund, the stormwater budget is at $16.1 million, which is about a 3% increase over the current year budget. There is also no rate increase in this year's proposed stormwater budget. Several years ago, in 2016, City Council at that time adopted a five-year rate plan for stormwater rates. It was suspended 1 year. We are also recommending to suspend it the 5th year, would have been the 5th and final year this year, to give us a time to do some analysis on the current revenue, as well as our projects and other costs, just as we do with our water and sewer system as well. So there is no rate increase enclosed in this year's budget. But we do have, obviously, a CIP going forward, so there still will be projects moving forward. We'll talk about that as well.
Can you suspend one when we had pledged them for 5 years?
So you will have to actually also vote on an ordinance, I believe, looking over at our city attorney, Teresa Knox, to confirm. So you will have to do the same that you did 2 years ago when we suspended the rate. You'll have to vote on the ordinance again to suspend the rate.
And it's okay with the bondholders?
It is, at this point, we're not issuing any debt in this coming year, so, and the system is still generating revenues for both operations and a capital improvement program, which we'll get into.
I bet you if you calculate it, that suspension will more than pay for a water rate increase of 7%.
Well, that's not a question I can answer, or,
It's a hefty fee.
yes, stormwater, the stormwater program, of course, is only on, stormwater is applied only on city customers. It's not charged to all of our water and sewer customers. It's just on city customers, of course. It is a city fee. And it funds the stormwater improvement program and the stormwater operations. Of course, again, that 5-year plan was to address a $90 million CIP over a certain period of time. With that, we'll talk a little bit, bring Mr. Palin back up to talk about the cash balance of the stormwater fund.
So these are numbers as of the end of March. Cash we had in the system is $33 million. We do have outstanding encumbrances. Most of that's capital projects ongoing. A little bit of operating, at least $14 million. We did issue a bond in 2018 as part of this plan, so the proceeds remaining in that are $29 million. So total funds available are $44 million. That's what will help pay for parts of the $11 million CIP in this year's budget. This cash number also is important as we update the rate study to see what we need to do to complete everything that was brought to y'all by Dana and Clint and Joey several years ago. That was a $93 million overall list of projects. We're 5 years later. It might be not the right thing to just issue a bond based upon a study so old. So we want to take a look, see where we're at. We potentially have generated more cash than what initially was in the initial study, and we may be able to issue a much smaller bond to complete those projects. But the bond will not be issued in the upcoming year. We will do the study this year and come back to y'all next year.
So moving forward with the stormwater fund, the budget, of course, $16 million. The operating budgets that make up stormwater, again, include public works and engineering. The public works division, in this case, again, is streets and storm drains. They're the folks that actually do the maintenance side of the storm drain system, and of course, some in-house construction projects. The engineering, of course, is for the portion of engineering that is related to designing our stormwater CIP. Debt service is included at roughly $2.5 million. and transfers out, the largest portion of that transfer out is for $5 million the total transfers out is 5.7, with 5.1 of that going for the stormwater improvement program for this coming year. That's the cash of the system. That means this, as Mr. Palin's already mentioned, that is referencing the cash generated from this year's budget going into the improvement program. Any questions about water and sewer or stormwater operating funds?
So, and the 560 to the general fund? No change from prior, how is that, what is that used for? Is that also used for water and sewer related? No, right?
No, that's the transfer, that's an indirect cost transfer to the general fund. That represents the cost of services that the general fund provides to the water and sewer system, or in this case, the stormwater system, just as though it were
Like a,
like an overhead.
Missy, and this might be a Frank or Clint question, do we ever split CIP project funding with the county, since lots of donut holes? Financially, the layout of money for stormwater, is there any working together on these larger stormwater system projects?
Belvedere, Yorkshire, some of those areas where the lines of responsibility
Right.
are less clear.
Yeah.
We have been working together to fund those types of improvements. And if it's within the city, once the improvements are made, then we take over for operation and maintenance.
Would you say that the county's commitment to increasing their stormwater infrastructure, I mean, how would you gauge that?
It's better, and we're coming around, and I think we're working together much better than maybe in some past years. And so, and those are two perfect examples of being able to work together to solve problems for our constituents
Right.
that are both in the city and in the county.
So increasing our annexation rate might help with our stormwater issues down the road?
Yes, sir, that potentially, yes, sir.
Perfect, thanks.
So we've talked about a $40 million capital improvement program. I wanted to answer just a couple of questions before we get into that were floated around. Frank and I were chatting, Reverend McDowell, when you asked about, what's the relative rate increase in future years that you're not voting on or not implementing, but on an inside city customer, a 5% rate increase for a monthly average bill of $50 would be $2.50 a month. So your average customer between $50 and $60, you're looking at $2.50 to $3 a month if the city implemented a 5% increase on water and sewer. So that gives you some idea of the magnitude we're talking about there. So, okay. Frank was going to mention this, and we got sidetracked a little bit. Inflation and our cost of chemicals has been a driver in terms of our O&M budget as well. When we're making water at our water treatment plants or treating waste, there are three big components to our cost. It's our people, and we're required to have licensed, certified operators there 24/7, 365, so we do. It's the power to run the equipment and pump the water, and it's the treating compounds, and those have gone up in cost an unbelievable amount. We've seen 25% rate increases on chlorine, which is our primary disinfectant that we have to have. So we're trying to absorb that and not pass that through, but that's a big driver for our O&M budget. But
What percentage of that budget is the chemical treatment?
so,
At the water treatment, I mean, wastewater, I have my own personal belief that wastewater it costs us to do. I mean, it's a service that we're never gonna make anything off of. But from the water standpoint, how much of the chemical is affected the canal plant, the lake plant?
so I'd say, in roughly similar budgets, and I'd say the chemical budget is probably 20 to 25% of that total operating budget. Man, the ballpark there, Frank?
Well, the bump this year at the wastewater plant is gonna be about $2 million for increase in the price
Just
of
in
chlorine.
chemicals?
At the two water plants, you add them together, it's about $2 million. Chlorine from the first quarter of '21 to now has doubled in price. It's gone from $650 a ton to $1,300 a ton, and we have to have it.
Thank you. Those are some of the things that are driving what we're doing in terms of of trying to control cost but some of these things are out of our control. Some of you may have been surprised with a proposal for a zero rate increase this year. Some may be pleasantly surprised with that, but there were a couple of things that allowed us to be in a position to be able to do that. So I wanted to speak to that first and set the table. The first thing is our compliance stance with our consent decree. We talk about that a lot. It's a federal consent decree. We have to comply with it. We're in compliance with it. We have asked EPA, or in the process of quantifying a request for more time to comply with the consent decree because of COVID, because of what it's done to us financially, what it's done to us staffing-wise, what it's done to the cost of things. All of those factors combined, we're making our case now and hoping and believe we're going to get some more time. But I can't come to you and say we're going to have certain impact from the consent decree and the ramifications are X, Y, and Z if I don't know what that time extension is going to be. So we're working very hard to try to get an answer out of EPA on how much time or extra time are we going to get because of COVID. Time is very valuable because a lot of our spend, a lot of our capital is tied to that consent decree and to that time. So we're trying to get every minute of extra time that we can. So that's important. And without that answer, it's hard for us to come forward with a huge capital spend, projects that we know we need to do, but we can't say we've got to do them by X date.
Clint, aren't those projects driven by the EPA? They decide which ones get done first and how long they're scheduled for? I mean, in that part of, some of it's driving from their side as well too, correct?
Yes, sir. We have gone ahead and put our head in the noose for our major infrastructure rehabilitation projects. I'm sorry to use that analogy. But we have committed to dates that projects that have to be done within 3, 5, or 7 years. We're evaluating the system, the smaller lines, 15 inches and below, and are coming up with those dates that we'll propose to EPA and they will approve, and then we have to live by those dates, and there are major fines if we don't do those projects by those dates. We're ahead of the game a little bit right now for the IRR, the infrastructure rehabilitation projects. So we've got a little bit of float in there. If we get some COVID time, that's going to really help us spread that spend out a little bit more. For the supplemental, there maybe, won't be as much float once that's approved. We start approaching the 2028, 2030 timeframe. We'll have to spend those dollars. So we know those things have to be done. Those projects have to be executed. There are also projects that are associated with capacity limitations. So if our hydraulic modeling or our sanitary sewer overflow history shows you've got a problem at this point in your collection system, you're spilling sewer continually or repeatedly here, we are limited to the amount of development that can happen in those areas. They become capacity limited. We don't have areas right now where we have capacity limitations, but we have areas that are threatened, and you'll see a slide on that in a moment, that if we don't execute projects within a certain date, I can't give you that date certain because I don't know how much extra time we're going to get because of the COVID force majeure. So it's really, really important. The other piece that's important is there's $800 to $900 million of state allocated money through the ARPA that's floating out there that will be administered through the Rural Infrastructure Authority. We will be able to apply for infrastructure grants for water and sewer. It's $800 to $900 million for water and sewer infrastructure and some for stormwater. We'll be able to apply for those projects. The awards will be $10 million per project. We have built that in, one project award, into our $40 million CIP, assuming that we get one project and it's capped at $10 million. We are very, very hopeful and are lobbying very, very hard that a utility the size of Columbia, out of a sense of fairness and the number of the population that we serve, we should get much more than $10 million if folks across the river and other parts of the state that have much smaller utilities are getting $10 million. If you look at it on a population basis, we should be getting $50 million. If we are successful with that request, that's another infusion of capital We just don't know. That bill hasn't been finalized yet. The governor hasn't signed it yet. But that's another opportunity to increase potentially another $40 million or maybe more into our capital spend plan. So it's hard for us to ask for more, and when we don't know that answer. We're hoping to have that answer soon. We'll work with our friends at Rural Infrastructure Authority and try to work to maximize the dollars that come to Columbia.
Just for clarification, because at one point there was grant opportunities, and I heard through the grapevine that a lot of that was gonna be focused on smaller towns, but they were gonna allow us, instead of going to the bond market, to go borrow money from the fund at like 1% or less, because that's what they were gonna do with the big, has some of that changed a little bit?
Yes, sir. There's, through the infrastructure bill,
Right.
there's going to be a lot more money in the state revolving loan fund where we could apply, if we chose to, for lower interest loans or low interest loans. Typically, we've gone to the bond market and been successful, but that's another avenue for us to borrow money. But this 800 to 900 million is
all
grant.
grant-based.
Yes, sir. It's grant, and we want to maximize that opportunity. We also have the collection issue that y'all spoke about earlier. If we can collect on some of this bad debt, that brings more cash into the system. That allows us to invest more as well. So that's really, really important that we get that cleaned up, and we're starting to be more and more aggressive on collecting on that bad debt. And we'll be coming to you with a plan to try to collect on that, maybe amnesty for late fees, those sorts of things. Jeff spoke about that earlier. So there's a lot of different variables moving around, and so we're asking for a pause on the rates, a $40 million CIP. Let me get to the real crux of how do we want to spend that $40 million? Yes, sir.
But I think we need to be very clear about that, because that figure is decreasing, and what you're doing is doing the right thing.
Yes, sir, and that's a great question.
And I hate that, yeah.
No, it's a great question. We have seen, we believe, the apex of the peak, and it is coming down. The last 2 months, it's trending downward. We've been at that point before, but we think with the new collection and cutoff, as we refine those policies, we will continue to see that decline. We also believe that if we're able to do some sort of an amnesty and PR push and potentially waive late fees if you pay within a certain time period, if you pay up completely within a certain time period, we may be able to collect a good bit more. We have lowered the threshold of past due debt for us to terminate your water service. Where every month we're dropping that down. There for a while, it was if you didn't owe $1,500, we weren't going to cut your water off. We had to start with the big ones and work our way down. We're working our way down. We're able to answer the phone calls and put folks on payment plans now with how we've restructured customer care. So we're able to handle that influx of requests that are coming in. So we're being much more aggressive in disconnecting for non-payment and getting those folks on a payment plan. When we put them on a 6-month or 12-month payment plan, you don't see the numbers drop as quickly.
But they do drop.
But they do start dropping, and if we do an amnesty program, perhaps we'll see a big dent be
Well, it
placed.
sounds like the benchmarks that you're setting represents some real change in terms of numbers in its decrease in the number of collections and the number of folk who, okay,
We're starting to see it, but we've got a ways to go.
I understand.
But if we can collect that bad debt, a good portion of that bad debt, that really helps us in our cash position and be able to fund CIP.
Thank
Clint, would you
sir.
say other water utilities of our size regionally are having the same collection issue? I don't know if everybody took the path we did for our customers during
We are
COVID,
rather,
but-
Councilman, we're rather unique in the path that we took. Everybody had to, because the governor mandated it. We suspended disconnects 2 days before the governor's mandate. That was lifted, I think, in about 30 days. Most of the other utilities that I've talked with within the state, within 3 months had gone back to normal practice. They said it was a painful couple weeks, but the elephant hadn't gotten so big by that point. By us waiting almost a year, the problem got really big. And we're trying to eat that thing strategically and get it down. So we're a little unique, I think, at least in South Carolina, I would say.
And of course, setting those benchmarks is going to help.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. And lowering those thresholds will be
Thank
important.
you, sir.
Well, as you get ready to move through the slides, I just want to help council get their bearings with their packet of information and the slides. I think the slides will show, but it may be easier for them to see towards the end of your packet where it says proposed capital improvement program. Those slides line up with what's in their packet that they received, right?
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. So the first thing would be the drinking water CIP, and you'll see that in your slide packet as well. So in general, we look at about 1/3 of the capital improvement program funding toward drinking water and about 2/3 toward wastewater. And the consent decree drives a lot of that wastewater spend. So you'll see our priorities are always regulatory compliance and making sure that we're treating an adequate volume of water and distributing that to our customers, and that the quality of that water is excellent. So you'll see water quality is driving about 62% of our spend. That's really, really important. And think when you hear water quality, think brown water, making sure we're addressing discolored water, and also addressing water leaks, because that can impact water quality as well. So aging infrastructure plays into that.
The AME meter change out, is that the last of the meter change out? That's not another change out. This is the leftover from the original?
It's left over, sir, but not in the original contract will be completed around July. And there were meters where we may have tree roots in the meter boxes and services that need to be renewed. And so we didn't pay the contractor to do those. They just returned those to us. We wouldn't have a plumber that's just setting meters do those. So there's a group of those that haven't been upgraded to the new meters because the service line or the box has got to be upgraded. So that's starting to take advantage of that.
That's the last of how many hundreds of thousands?
About 150 some odd thousand. Yes, sir. There's a few holdovers there that we've got to address. And so that does that, and that offers an opportunity for us to involve small, local contractors to do that type of work. So we see that as an
Small
opportunity.
bonded and insured.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Absolutely. You'll see our filter improvements at the Canal and Lake Murray Water Treatment Plant, funded at $2.5 million. That was partially funded last year. And due to some cost escalations, we're needing an additional $2.5 million to execute that project. That is very, very important. We've got some old filter under drains that if we don't replace those, we're going to have trouble meeting summer demands going forward. We're okay for this year, but it's just routine maintenance that absolutely has to be done, has to be a priority for us. You'll notice the Rosewood area water line replacement funded at $3 million. That's phase one of Rosewood. We funded that to the tune of $7.5 million last year. The cost of price, the cost of pipe, asphalt, valves, fittings, all the materials, the cost of that project has grown quite a bit. So we're estimating an additional $3 million needed to fully fund that project and move forward with that. Yes, sir. Well, it was originally estimated a few years ago, but yes, sir, that's what the estimate, the engineering estimate is coming back at now, so.
But the design of phase 2 and 3 of Rosewood is still continuing.
Yes, sir.
Am I correct?
and Nearing completion, so we'll be ready when we can fund it with CIP to move on to phase 2 and then to phase 3. You don't see Shandon water quality on here this year for additional funding. We're completing the design of that one. We'll be ready to move that to construction
In the process.
next year. Yes, sir. Yes, sir. So we're going to do the permitting, complete the design, do the permitting, and have it shovel-ready for next year's CIP, and then supplement.
When
the
costs
funding that's
hopefully come
needed.
down, right?
We hope so. Yes, sir. You'll also notice water quality projects citywide, $4 million. That's an opportunity for us to identify areas where we've had continual leaks, continual pressure problems, continual discolored water complaints. Those can be in-house designs, and our intention is to take at least a good portion of that and let our small contractors execute that work. And so again, local dollars being spent to execute that work. We could spend a lot more in that area. Councilman Duvall, you asked about what are we not doing? There's a lot more we could do in terms of replacing aging infrastructure, but we think $4 million gives us a good start toward that program of working down.
You're
And
talking about like South Walker and those areas that traditionally have had low pressure because of it's all aging infrastructure.
it allows us to address those, they're not part of a bigger project, but it hits some of those hot spots. There's some apartment complex where we have chronic leaks and chronic water quality problems. Go in and replace that infrastructure. And those are designs we can do with our engineers in-house and do a quick bid and get the work done. So we want to be very efficient in doing that, demonstrate that we can spend that $4 million and come back next year with a higher number for that. Any questions about the drinking water side? I'll just show you a map really quickly. Well, it didn't show up well at all, of what we're doing. A lot of treatment plant work and some water quality work.
I think that's in their packet.
It should be, yes. So we'll move on to wastewater. Obviously, consent decree compliance is very important. Minimizing sanitary sewer overflows is very important. And making sure that we've got capacity in our lines so that we don't have those capacity restricted areas. Very, very important. We're stepping back in terms of our spend this year. We're looking at a $27 million CIP. As we look at that 120 going forward, those are big numbers, but that's pretty serious. Things, we start using up any dead band, any float that we've got in schedules. So we'll be having a much different conversation next year to try to be able to make sure we can meet those requirements. And we'll know those answers from the COVID force majeure request. You'll see West Columbia pump station improvements. We've got some work that if we don't do there, we're capacity limited for West Columbia and all the way up through the Saluda River basins. So very, very important work that we've got to do there. It's not big work, but it's very important. Yes, sir.
Are we wholesale retail with West Columbia, is that what we do?
Retail sewer to West Columbia, yes, sir.
Retail,
Yes, sir.
so they don't take anything off the top.
I'm sorry. They're a wholesale supplier to, we take their flow on a wholesale basis. They're actually part owner of the Metro wastewater treatment plant. Very small percentage, but they own a portion of the Metro wastewater treatment plant.
Okay, so is West Columbia paying a portion of that?
Any capital upgrade we do, including West Columbia Pump Station, they pay a small portion of that based on a flow proportion and capacity proportion. Less than 5%.
Bill, just education. So on the bill, on the wholesale retail, what's the spread there?
I'd have to look at.
We're paying them 25% of every bill, and they're only paying 5% of the improvements, it just seems out of balance, that's what
We're paying them 25%.
In other words, if they're collecting $1, they're paying us 75 cents.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
And then there's a capital improvement to be made, and it costs $1, and we're paying 95 cents. You can't make it up in volume.
No, sir, and part of that original contract was based on the flow, the amount of the capacity that they own. I'll have to look and see what they're charging. Yes, sir, and I'm sorry, I don't know off the top of my head, but I'll find that answer for you.
And then could you tell me where the capacity issues are? Is that's most of the capacity issues are on over there, or we have capacity issues in certain areas in the city?
So this is a good map that demonstrates that. We have capacity issues up, potential capacity issues up in the northeast, the Crane Creek Basin. See if I can point with this. In this area, so if we don't do some things, that would limit us from adding taps in that area and also serving the Blythewood Industrial Park, which is very hot right now. And we're the ones that are in a position to be able to serve, the industry up there, particularly any categorical industry that might come up there. So very important that we were able to keep that area out of capacity limitation.
Clint, my argument would be there is it has to be a massive amount of volume because the cost per cubic foot for us to treat something from that area is astronomical. And it's our biggest problem with our consent decree and it's our biggest cost that we're having to fund and offer. So, I mean, I'd like to see those calculations, because I'm still a believer that we shouldn't be doing sewer outside the city.
Yes, sir. I mean, to go from here to the wastewater treatment plant, it's a long way, no question about it, and it's a tortured
And it ain't
path.
all downhill.
It's not,
either.
it's not easy, but it does, this area does drain organically to our North Columbia pump station. But I hear you, and I understand, but we've really tried not to limit development and growth in that area if at all possible.
I agree with you. I just think we'll really need to take an analytical look at that, because that may be something that we need to talk with the county and the other suppliers out there.
Same partner structure. Do we have more partner structures like we have with West Columbia in other regions of our water districts?
We are a wholesale taker of sewer for Carolina Water, for Fort Jackson, Richland County, and a few small areas. Yes, sir, we are.
And when it comes to wastewater, we as a water utility board make that decision if we do expand into other areas?
So the service areas are defined by what's called the 208
Right.
plan, and being on the
Oh,
COG.
yeah.
Yes, sir. And so the boundaries are defined, and so we have to petition to change those boundaries. They were largely developed based on gravity flow, and the regional planning concept is to have fewer discharges into the river
That's a
from
good point.
fewer plants.
Yeah. Are we coming close to the end of our borders for that?
Yes, sir. We serve everywhere within our 208 area.
Okay.
We have very little, it's mostly infill now, what we would be talking about.
We
in
don't have any
terms of
plans
expansion.
to ask for extensions of the 2.8 area?
No, sir. No, sir. You'll notice the Saluda River Basin as well. There are several critical projects that we're moving forward with that we've got to do. One being, it's on the CIP for this year, the Saluda River Force Main Extension. If we don't get those projects executed and the capacity limitation deadline is finalized and comes into effect, then you could have a huge swath of that area from Harbison down, and including some wholesale from Blue Granite, Carolina Water, go into a moratorium. So we're trying to move forward either with design or construction with each of those projects. So if it's not funded, we're ready to move whenever we know when those true deadlines are. So we're doing everything we can to stay out of that situation. But these are major spends. These are pretty significant dollars to be spent in those areas to serve within our designated 208 plan.
If we didn't commit to those funds, would that completely shut down development in those areas?
If we don't meet the deadlines, yes, sir, it would, no more sewer taps. That's what that would mean. Yes, sir.
The blue area is on the east side of the river or the west side?
Yes, sir. That's going up Interstate 26, St. Andrews, Harbison. Yes, sir. Any other questions about our wastewater spend? A little bit of expenditure plan for the waste treatment plant, just some necessary things that we have to do with dewatering there and thickening. Yeah, most of it's spelled out there. Well, let's move on to stormwater. You'll see the list of projects there. Our drivers for stormwater in terms of capital projects are really trying to address nuisance flooding and restoring ditches or streams and making those work better and beautifying them while we do that. And then water quality is also a piece of that equation where you've got some constructed wetlands and detention and that sort of thing. It allows the opportunity for the sediment to settle out, and you're not polluting the streams and the waterways as much. So that's a lot of what we're doing. You'll see the specific projects listed. You may think Convention Center Tunnel, we may or may not be doing something at Convention Center. Why are we doing something to the tunnel? There's a tunnel that goes under that Convention Center property. It's already there. There could be some structural issues with that, and so we've got Jimmy Chow and the team looking at that, and we budgeted some structural improvements to that so that it's ready if anything needs to be built on top of it, or it's ready if nothing's built on top of it. We're just shoring that up.
Can you
Yes, sir. It's, as I understand, north of Lake Catherine, and it's really,
Stretch from Trenton Road down to Little Lake Catherine?
yes, sir, I believe it is.
Is that the wall reconstruction?
It is the wall, yes, sir. That is reconstructing that wall and that ditch and making it flow properly, because it's caved in some areas, it's in danger of caving in other areas, so we've been working with property owners to try to reconstruct that, shore that up.
Yeah.
Yes, sir.
That stretch
Yes, sir.
all the way down.
Something's happening back there.
Pieces are done, but this particular stretch is not done. Yes, sir. Thank you, thank you. We've been working strategically on some hot spots, but this is to address the entire Penn Branch area going down to Little Lake.
When we get down there to what I call the choke point, where it chokes into Little Lake Catherine, is that gonna be the dredging of that as well? Which is that choke canal that goes in there, because, I mean, I walk by there at night, I mean, there is mounds of sediment in there. And when I went to the stormwater meeting the other night at the Creighton, a lot of the residents were really concerned about long-term because of how much sediment is coming from Forest Acres and other places that are collecting in there. And is this a discussion we need to have with Forest Acres as well? I know they traditionally have not contributed to this, but I mean, all the studies that we did on Little Lake Catherine, Big Lake Catherine showed a significant amount of that material coming from there.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. It absolutely is a discussion we need to have. I don't believe, I wish Dana were here, she's celebrating her daughter's graduation from USC. And, but she would know the details. I don't believe dredging of Little Lake is included in this
Not
specific
Little Lake, the
project.
canal.
The canal
Going in.
leading to, I'll find out, Mayor, I'm just not sure.
That would be, I think based on what's triggered down there long-term, yeah. I know we put some money away for Little Lake Catherine. I know that Frank and them have committed to a portion of it. The county is where we still have a gap.
Yes, sir.
That we need to follow up with, because that's affecting, goes from there to Big Lake, which then goes to Gills Creek, which then creates another problem for us.
Yes, sir.
Thank you.
Any other questions?
Different funds throughout the city. We probably haven't really shown this in years. It is, but there's been several requests, and it's probably good to understand what we do have out there. We do post this each year in the annual report. It's in the back in one of the schedules amongst the 500 other schedules, so it's pretty good for us to show you all this. Right here, we're taking a look at this would be all of our debt that's reflected in the general fund. It's broken out so you can see principal and interest that's due with the total amount for fiscal year 2023. That number will match the numbers that Missy Kaufman has showed you. We show you the first 5 years, then we show you the amounts broken out over the years after that. The capital lease repayment schedule is also included in the debt service. So over the last several years, you've heard Missy and staff talk to y'all about a capital lease. We use that mostly for our rolling stock for the general fund. Over the years, that capital lease has been either 7.5 to 8 million, and this year it'll be $9 million. So for fiscal year 23, that's our total amount due is the $5,708,000. That's on past years' capital leases. Yes, sir. It's going to be more. It was very inexpensive. I'll have to get that back out to you. I'll look at the last 5 that we've done, and I'll actually send it out and give you the interest rate on all 5 of them.
Is the lease counted against our 8%?
It's a good question. It is not. Make sure that it is not. And the banks are aware of that, too. That's a common question. Next up, this is our water sewer debt service schedule. It's a little bit larger number than our others. You'll see our total outstanding principal is $675,975,000. That's paid off between now and 2052. For fiscal year 2023, you'll see the total amount is the $45,361,000 that was on the study earlier. There's also on the study that I showed you and Missy showed you earlier, there's also an additional amount that's not included on there yet of about $2,538,000. That'll be the bond that we still have to issue this fall. We had first reading 2 months ago. We'll have second reading coming up. One of the things we're working on doing is getting back into a regular schedule. So anytime we issue bonds, they occur after that council has approved that budget. So we might not get into an awkward position of one council approves a budget and a bond issue, but then if we have turnover on council, we don't issue to the next spring.
But that is what's happening this time, and we're reminded.
And going forward, we'll issue our water and sewer bonds in the fall, right after we have the cap.
Add it to this, though? You've had a first reading, so we're gonna issue it at
Yeah,
some point.
well, I don't know the
would
true
think
debt
it should be
service.
up there.
I can add that in. It's an estimate.
Question, but tell me again, how much and where is it?
It's not in there, that's
Well,
the point.
you verbally said it.
No, it'll be potentially for 89 million. We'll see how cash finishes the year out. That's what we
But
brought
that
to
goes
y'all.
Where? Where would it go on here?
That is part of that goes towards CIP and cash. So we had 120 million in cash in the current year that we're in. We really needed to ideally issue that bond, but not every project has started. So we're delaying it for several months to issue the bond.
Issues it go into FY '23?
For where it'd be paid here? There'll be a half a year's payment. It would go into the FY '23. That's correct.
How much goes in there is what I'm asking.
We estimate $2,538,000. Is that the right number?
And just to clarify, that new bonding that we're doing is a refunder, is that correct?
No, it'll be new cash.
All new cash.
If there is a refunding ability, although in the current environment, I'm not going to suggest that that's a likelihood to occur. This is our stormwater debt service schedule. We did issue a bond back in 2018 for approximately, I have it written down, $43 million. That was the first part of the stormwater rate study. Then we have our parking debt service schedule. You'll have not seen the parking fund yet. I think Missy will be going over that after I quit talking. But for fiscal year '23, the total for principal and interest, $3 million, a little over.
You had you do the coverages on the other stuff that you do,
Yes, sir.
the ratios, can you add that
We can.
to these charts?
Yes. Would you like to use estimate for the upcoming year or kind of based on historical? Maybe I can do both. I'll take a look and see what we can put together.
Estimated and historical, no.
Okay.
Could I also request, and we talked about this prior to, is getting appraisal done on the system and each individual parking garage?
You're talking about for parking system?
Yes.
Ms. Wilson, we do have you got a parking study coming, right?
We do.
Should be like within a couple, 3 weeks, 4 weeks, right?
I'll get an update. I will. But
Might
we've
be a
also-
little
we-
longer than 3
yeah.
to 4 weeks.
We, early summer. I'll get you an update. So
Okay, I just thought I'd heard 30 days.
we've added to it, or I requested, which is a different study on the outsourcing of enforcement.
Our hospitality tax debt service schedules. And like the others, it lists the amount for the next 5 years. We do not have anything scheduled coming up for any new issues.
Stadium?
Yes, sir, that includes everything. And I'll
Is the
include,
reason why we're in debt with the hospitality tax, is that expected? I mean, it feels like with water and sewer and some of the larger projects, obviously, is it because we use some of that for those larger multi-million dollar projects like the stadium?
Stadium is the project.
The only project.
There's some other H bond in there.
there's some other earlier issues from 18 years ago that paid for some things as well. Some of it was renovation, some of it was for just even like the Southeast Park, the signs that were out there for the Wayfinder program. Yeah, so what we can do is get a list of the projects, get that out to you from the older bonds.
What's the difference in fiscal year 28-32 that jumps up so high?
Well, that's 5 years worth of debt. It just gets rolled up. Unless you just wanted a sheet that
Oh, I
was.
see, I see.
So going forward after the first 5 years, it's a roll-up.
And it jumps up.
It's actually copied out of how it gets reported in the annual report.
Gotcha.
So when I send this out, I'll also show you all the coverage ratios, because those are all important numbers in all of these different funds. And that's all I have on debt, unless y'all have additional questions.
When are we anticipating that second reading coming, though? I just want everyone to,
Sure.
when it comes, to remember what we talked about today.
Yes, I would anticipate the second reading August, September.
Thank you, Jeff.
Hello again. Okay, we have a few more things to get through today, and so hopefully we can make some progress here in the next few minutes that we have. So parking fund, the parking fund proposed budget is $9.2 million. We did provide this information about the revenues back in March. We have maintained those revenue projections for the coming year. It is relatively flat compared to current year. However, current year, we had projected use of American Rescue Plan funds. We are not projecting that in the coming year, based on the where we are seeing revenue collections coming in to date. So we are not projecting any use of American Rescue Plan funds, most likely in this year at all, I believe, to make our budget, as well as for next year. And Jeff will go over cash as well with that one.
Can I ask a question about that?
Yes, sir.
No recommended rate adjustments are included in the revenue. I mean, don't we anticipate rate increases once we get that study back?
Well, the rate study definitely could come back with some suggested rates, adjusted rate adjustments, but we don't have what those are at this point in time, and so city council would take those into consideration when they're brought forward. So we wouldn't make
And
any
you can act
predictions.
on them then. I mean,
I mean,
we
my
would have
question
to
is,
know
wouldn't we
some-
want to project something in there for a rate increase? I mean, we project stuff in there for property tax increases, and we don't have that yet either. I mean, my point is, I mean,
Well, we
I mean, one of
adjusted,
the things I've heard as we've looked through economic development things over and over again is that we're too inexpensive on our garage parking. And I think that's a general consensus that we have that, and I feel, I mean, I would
Study's
think,
gonna validate what we already know.
Right.
I think we were, obviously waiting to have it, but, yeah, that's something we can talk about.
I think if we were to do a rate projection or assumptions of some dollar amount, we would probably reserve that amount in the expenditure side in order to have the budget balance and not anticipate spending it until we knew whether or not the rate study would come in at that rate or something, possibly. So we could look at that consideration.
But that would go under garage and lots, most likely, right?
It would go, well, we would budget it as a reserve for potential,
Okay, overall.
most likely for cash in the system or regards to capital projects or other future needs, which Jeff can talk about here in a moment as well when he gets to to Cash if you want to go ahead and come up. Well, I will say while I'm up here and finishing that piece, so revenues are coming in fairly strong, of course, parking meters being probably the strongest of that. And then, of course, our garages and lots, which reflects the addition of 2 new garages that are opening in this, or decks, as they are called, opening in this current fiscal year, as we're all aware, Freed Street and Sable Street. And parking study is on the way as well.
So the parking study is on the way. You make a good point. Why do we not project that now? Water and sewer, we can be very clear exactly what we're doing with it and what it is. We can do comparisons. Water and sewer is much easier to compare just nationwide. It's everywhere. Parking systems are hard to compare to other systems other than just what you and I pay when we go and pay on the street, because they're run differently. Some are a general fund, some's an enterprise. Some just lose money, and it's been different. So we also, as staff, don't really have the experience on what we're going to do in a rate increase in parking. I've been here 14 years. We have never had a parking rate increase. We had a penalty increase one time of like $1. So the few times that we brought it up, so I will say there's a lot of capital improvement needs in our parking system. And if we come back, I know that Missy Gentry's setting up a meeting right now with me and her and staff to meet with the people going through the study. So based upon your comments, I'm actually interested to see how far along and what their suggestions are. And we might be able to come back and take a look at this a little differently based upon the revenues, which would really add, I'm not suggesting it should add to the cash of the system, that's always nice. But we've got a lot of improvements, maintenance needs in all of the current garages that's probably where we're gonna wanna utilize it.
Well, I mean, one of the things that we've discussed some is modernizing and maybe looking at the possibility of removing meters and things and replacing them with more enterprise-type parking arrangements. And again, if we're going to look at the possibility of CapEx on those type things, we need to put the revenue in there, you know. And again, I would like for us, Ms. Wilson, to go ahead and begin to set the level of expectation that that rates are going to get adjusted. I mean, we could see a pretty significant.
Just did it.
Well, I mean, we just don't want it to read like that, and because I do think there's some very, there's stimulating conversations on things we can accomplish with parking downtown and other areas that we probably want to do. It's going to cost some money, but they're going to all generate, I think, additional revenue. So that's the only thing is.
And I would add, I mean, part of what we've been talking about is having staff also assess skinning and cleaning up the garages so the appearance when you ride by don't look so aged, and all of that's gonna cost money, and it's gotta be driven from the system.
I mean, we have life safety issues as well.
Yep.
We have to
Yep.
address right now.
Yep.
When we have a number, we've tried to factor that in as we were going through the budget process with Henry, and his team and Missy and parking staff.
In terms of the timeline of the rate study, do we know when we'll have that completed, and will that be aligning with the budgeting process?
We have, Missy's traveling right now. She's saying the rate consultant, we have a meeting with him or her later this week. So we'll be able to get
Maybe we could get a little
status.
indication so that y'all could start planning and to go ahead and put in an estimate so that we can start working towards.
Yes, sir.
Just to add what the mayor was saying is, if we had some preliminary cost estimates on what it might cost us to change out things like meters to Passport or other type of things and to wash these garages and things like that, it would even give us some guidance as to how much we wanted to and when we wanted to execute rate increases in the garage. That's all I'm saying.
I think we have a good handle on the needs for the maintenance, but the other we need to get that.
Thank you.
Yep.
Glad to hear that push in that direction.
Yep. I'm excited.
We Very.
I don't think I'd ever hear this
Well,
discussion.
different.
So just,
Kelvin will be very excited.
yes, so cash, parking fund cash, just to give you an idea where we're at, and this is as of the end of March. So our beginning cash, $8,348,000. We have encumbrances, mostly capital, a little bit of operating, $2 million. That leaves net cash is $6.3 million. There are no outstanding bond funds or anything else. I want to stress what Ms. Kaufman had mentioned earlier. We did not use ARP in the current year or for any of the past years, so, but we still have, I'm going to say some cash. That fund balance used to be a little closer to 9, 10, 11 million. We have dwindled some over the last few years. Some of it's been through projects to improve, but some of it was just going through the last couple of years. The revenues were a little low. Well, that's putting it mildly. The pandemic had an effect on the parking system. However, we've come through it. We talk about fund balance and the importance of fund balance over the years. When bondholders, not that we've issued a new bond with parking recently, but that's one of the reasons they ask those questions. So they try to determine, can they sustain getting through? I'm not sure we all thought a pandemic, but not the best number, but it is still,
Better than zero.
it is better than zero, and it is still chugging along. And I may be done for the day, so you don't have to hear from me anymore.
That was an invitation, I believe. Yes, sir?
The encumbrances we have with parking, $2 million, and you have them listed as capital and operational. Are those capital expenses, capital maintenance pieces?
Combination of both.
Yeah, I can go and take a look, see exactly what they are. Most of that's gonna be some sort of smaller capital going on over there. It won't be any major projects.
Capital expenditures, outlays.
I'll get you a list.
Yeah, I mean, that's fine, Jim. I guess why I'm asking is that we're talking about sprucing up, the garages. Could that be a part of the?
It says operations expenditures.
Perhaps the sprucing up, and we're not talking about additional monies.
Yeah, I'll have to check. I'll be honest, I don't believe too much of that encumbrance is on the sprucing up side. It is probably not on the sprucing up side. It's probably more on other dramatic needs of the facility.
Operational than capital.
No,
Well, it may be
Accounting debt
capital.
service
It's just
and
not-
Operational.
Sprucing up, like we need I'm sorry, I don't know if I'm
Well, I mean,
adding
we
to
can
the,
talk-
what
we-
you're
I
saying,
don't
like we
wanna
need
add
the
on-
elevator, we need.
Okay, so we'll talk about the definition, but, so it could be work on an elevator. I would call that a capital.
I was just curious whether or not it was capital slash expenditure, or whether it was just operational. So it's a combination.
You wanna add to that, or? You have to come up here.
I just wanna make sure that we're not using two different things. I mean, I'm sorry.
No, one of the examples would be from a capital perspective, we have some structural issues in the Taylor Street garage, meaning that there are cracks in the infrastructure. That's pretty serious. It's an older garage, so that would be an example of what we're dealing with.
Fixing the elevator is operational.
You would say that's.
Potentially.
I mean,
I do.
I'm not,
That would be an
Put
operating.
a new elevator in is capital.
Yeah,
Repair the
well, that's
elevator, it's
what-
operational.
I thought we were putting a new elevator in.
Yeah, so.
new
a
elevator.
new
It's
e-
a
new
$600,000 fix.
A new
so-
elevator would fall on the capital side, maintaining or maintenance, repair, or on the operational side, yes.
all right, I just think we need to be clear. I just think we need to be clear about that delineating line. I mean, I don't have any pushback on that other than just for it to be self-explanatory in terms of what's capital. I'm talking, thank you, for the respect. Mrs., I'm just trying to figure out, not to figure out, and of course, I don't have any pushback. He's hangry. Either side, whether it's capital or operational. I just want to make sure we understand collectively what those two items.
Sure, absolutely. And I think once the rate study comes back and we bring forward what plans would be for those funds that we were able to generate from the rate study, would be in a capital program, as well as some operating, obviously, some operating improvements, because some of those repairs, some of those expenses are going to be part of the operating cost.
It could be a thin line that separates it.
Yes, sir.
All those decks are in your district too.
We're not talking about that, we're just talking about a capital and operating.
worried about it.
So moving through the parking fund budget, again, the operating side reflects both parking facilities and parking operations. That would be the support services crew, as well as the staff, the meter readers, and the garage attendants, and all of the folks that maintain and operate our parking system. There is a debt service, as Mr. Palin has recently reviewed with you, of $3 million, and a transfer to the general fund of $500.
Can I ask just a quick question on the debt service? On the Bull Street garages, how are you accounting for the debt service in that?
That would be in a different, you want to speak to the,
Thought you were gonna be finished.
yeah, like I said, that was an invitation.
Because that's not a bond, you got something else, because
Yes.
on the
so
schedule I saw, there's a parking bond that comes into play for these garages.
There will be, and
10 years from now.
it's not on here yet, because we haven't issued them yet. So the first set of decks are paid for out of, we generically call it the OPEB funds. So that was the 16 million and change. Those are the two decks that are being built right now. I'll have to pull up the memo and I can redistribute that. I think it's 2029, the parking system will then issue a bond and pay the funds back to the city, or specifically to the OPEB fund, with a rate of return. The second set of garages or garage, estimate amount, 20,600,000.
That doesn't exist yet, right?
When you say
Garages just exist now.
to exist,
So the debt service on building those garages should be accruing somewhere.
so the cash has been paid out of OPEB. So
I mean, it's 1%, right?
1.5%.
That 1.5%, is it needs to be accrued in
Yeah, I'm going to have to look. I believe that's a discussion we have with the auditors this year of whether we'll start accruing for the 1.5%, and for the full thing, and how to reflect that as debt. Because we have not issued the bond yet, but the discussion becomes, it's an obligation because y'all have passed an ordinance. I got to remember if that's an ordinance or a resolution. So as we finish up this year, that's going to be that's one of the discussions we're having. So our new finance director is going to have fun having that discussion too, because she wasn't here during the enactment of this.
Okay, and that should have an asterisk at the bottom of it, that it doesn't reflect the carrying cost of $16 million worth of debt.
I can add that. I can add that.
You know what I'm saying? I mean.
Yes, sir. No, you're correct. We have added that in other documents about that both of the potential bond issues.
Is there a reason you're gonna wait 10 years to issue the bond?
We worked with our financial advisor. We could not issue the bonds in the current, in the parking system today. So at that point, those bonds would be issued in conjunction with the existing bonds at both times. So they're all getting rolled in together. System would not have the ability to do it today. It is believed it will have the ability to do it in 2029.
One last question. Would it not be prudent to begin to amortize that $16 million now? I mean, you don't have to just carry the cost and then sell the bond 10 years from now. I mean, if we have money available, you can begin to amortize that 16 and pay it back into the.
So you make a very good point, and that's something Brent Roberts and I have talked about as we go through this rate study. In the past, it would be harder to be doing that based upon the parking system and the rates that we charge. As we look to change the rate structure, that is something that, if that is something council's interested in, we certainly can do that.
And I hate to pay interest on parking garages for 40 years.
Oh, no, hey, I am right there on you. This is kind of different. So, yes, I'll be more than happy to look at that, and we can see how that figures in.
Right. So, saving probably one of the favorites for last, hospitality tax fund. The hospitality, we will review both hospitality tax and accommodations tax. First being the hospitality tax budget, which is, we are projecting $12.7 million in hospitality. That is an increase of $2.6 million or 27% over the budget, current year budget. But it's about 2% over both current year and projected prior year actual collections. It is more representative of pre-pandemic collections. We're glad to say with regards to our hospitality tax revenues program, which is very good. We also, again, are not including any allocation from American Rescue Plan funds in this budget and do not anticipating needing to use those in the current budget. So we'll go over that fund balance as well. Any questions about revenues before we speak to HTAX fund balance?
This be the right time, if it needs to come later, just tell me.
Okay.
We had talked earlier about the possibility of replacing the zoo millage with HTAX funding.
It's into the presentation, yep. So we'll cover revenues and then go into how you want to allocate those revenues. So as far as HTAX fund balance, we projected having a we have a fund balance starting July 1 of $4.1 million. We had projected use of fund balance in the current budget of $1.2 million. Then we also included a budget of use of ARPA from 1.7. Again, as mentioned, we don't feel like we will need to utilize fund balance or the ARP funds. In terms of revenue projections, we're projecting to collect about $12.1 million and a budget of $13 million. And I know that looks like we would be overspending our revenues. We actually have a current year budget. The hospitality tax budget is right at 12.7. And of course, we do have some prior year actuals that would come in there as well. So subtotal looks like we are projecting add about $900,000 to our fund balance. So we'd be ending the year about $3.2 million with the fund balance. That would be ending June of 2023, right? So, ending right now. So just keeping that in mind as we move forward. And in some years past, we have allocated fund balance with the budget. We're not necessarily advocating for that, but we're just putting it out there and letting everyone know since we have talked about our cash balances in our other funds. As far as expenditures, available for allocation using just the budgeted revenues or projected revenues is 6.5. Again, we have not projected any use of any fund balance. The proposed budget includes a transfer to the general fund of $3.7 million and includes debt service of $2.5, which is what leaves the balance of the $6.5 available for allocation.
What's the 3.7 used for in the general fund?
So in the general fund, that would be for activities and services that the general fund provides that would be eligible for hospitality funds and eligible HTAX uses. Recreation, so a lot of our park greenway systems would be an eligible use as recreational, is one example.
And the 3.2 back here, how does this play into, this is what's projected. Can you explain that again? I'm on the previous page, the 3.2 million, how does that?
So that's referring to our fund balance. That's referring to, just like we did with the other funds, that's basically the cash.
What we have now?
What we
Okay.
would project to have as available. This would be over and above our projected budget for the coming year. So looking at, just as some primer information and background, how hospitality tax funds have been allocated previously. Of course, we have a HTAX committee. We're hopeful that today you will give us an amount that City Council will allocate towards the H-Tax Committee, so that that committee can start meeting and making recommendations for allocations that, of course, come back to City Council for final approval. As you recall, we have a grant program. All of those grants have been received, or applications have been received, and the H-Tax Committee is being assembled for upcoming meetings. Those meetings have not been set yet, but would be scheduled once we have an idea as to how much would be available for allocation.
When you say grants, you say it's the line item that you're talking about?
Those line items are actually a separate group.
Okay.
Line item agencies are, we almost think of them as sort of legacy groups of the city. The city has some kind of fiduciary responsibility for them. We either own the facility or we have some other kind of relationship with them. For instance, Columbia Museum of Art or Historic Columbia, we own the homes of Historic Columbia, 2 of the homes. But, and then we have a contract required for, that helps support the operations of those homes.
Is the 6.5 the total of the committee?
That's both H-Tax Committee and line item agencies.
H-Tax Committee is 3.895.
Right. That's, but 3.8 is what what has, all of the applications that have come in are reflecting of 3.8 million. And the 6.5 is what you have available to spend of those allocations, and this is just a request.
Line item request, where did that come from, and is that something that we're gonna discuss at the appropriate time?
I mean, they're the same ones that you always have, but this newly
Well, I
seated
get
council
that.
needs to.
I understand that they're normal, but they're just, I mean, it seems to be there's some significant increases in others, just wanna understand.
So let me clarify
What their
too.
requests are. Oh.
Right, so to clarify, what you see on the proposed budget is just what they've requested. Is not, city staff has not made any recommendations for allocations to either line item agencies or the committee. So what you're seeing is what the total amount has been requested from these groups.
Thank you.
Yes. The only other category that would, I'm sorry. It's on, it's. It's in the attachments. It's in the hospitality tax summary is probably the best way in your memo packet.
Is it what they requested individually?
The line item agencies, the applications don't come to council,
Right,
but the line item agency requests are in here. How much they've requested. Yes.
Tina, it's that same one that we're looking at for water, and it's like 2 pages after the water budget.
We will definitely add page and numbers to the future discussions. Yes, we understand. So again, there is another section of allocations that's been we refer to as council allocations. There has not been as many of those this year because in the current year, city council made all of the allocations because of the committee was suspended. We do reflect, city council has in the past, or we in the past have had a contract for some calendar services with Leisure Fund. Again, these are just what's been suggested. Parks and Recreation Foundation, we do continue to fund those for special events like the Veterans Day Parade is one example. Those are actually operated by, and they also help fund the police services at these events as well. And then River Alliance, the contract with the River Alliance that the city has that's split between general fund and hospitality tax fund. So as far as for today's discussions, looking forward, as already has been mentioned, staff has not made any recommendations for allocations, pending conversations with city council. What has come before you all today and to the city with regards to requests reflect the amount from that hospitality tax committee. Of course, that's just the amount that's been requested from all of the applications. That's not assuming all of the applications are even eligible. They've made it through the initial part, so that presumably they are eligible. And then, of course, line item agencies request $3 million.
When is the committee meeting?
We were targeting to meet with the committee at the end of May or early April, early June, so that by the second meeting in June, we would bring back city council recommendations for city council approval of the committee allocations. So that they could start, so we could start the fiscal year July 1.
The 3.895 is what they have to work with?
That's not an amount that they have to work with. That's what's been requested by all of the applications. We're waiting today for, or looking for city council direction in terms of how much you would want to allocate for committees. It's been in the neighborhood of 2 to 3 million pre-COVID. It's been a little while since we've had a committee, so. That's a good number, sir. I do not have a number of applications, but I can get that for you. We do. $60 to $70?
So how does that account for the cultural office and the zoo question?
So that's another part of the equation. is-
Unfortunately, my apologies, I am gonna have to run here in just a second.
Sure.
And this is,
Right.
This is for us to discuss. This is
Yeah, that's a
one of our
proposal
work
I'll have.
sessions for us to discuss how we want to.
Yeah, that's info I'll bring forward on that, because it was my proposal.
wait a minute, I got,
I'll bring that proposal forward to council on that $400,000.
not today, though.
Not today.
Same thing on the zoo, right?
Correct. We could reserve out an amount for that and determine how much an amount for the others. And then, of course, also consideration for allocation for Finley Park, which would likely be done through.
Confirm the millage rate, because what the zoo told me the millage rate was and what's up there is also different. So we need to confirm.
They're probably looking at their full millage.
We just need to confirm it, but I think the plan moving forward is we have this for information, and then we need to put our heads together. Obviously, you know, a lot of stuff is application, this stuff that's outside the application is for us to discuss in our work session prior to budget.
So the only number that is. So the only number that is for sure is the 6.5, and then how we decide to divvy it up for the different ways of spending hospitality tax is what needs to be determined.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
Let me say that another way to see if I'm understanding it the same way she is. The 6.5 is the total we have available, and then these numbers you have here, 3.895 is the
Right.
total amount of requests to the committee.
Yes.
Right. I think, the actual total request, well, yeah, so I did not add that up for you, but I could certainly add up everything that's on your sort of request list to give you a total amount. And everything requested, of course, exceeds.
The 3.8 plus 3.0 requests already is very close to it's probably going to be over what we even have to allocate.
Right.
Because they're asking, some people are asking a 250 to,
Decide
right.
when it comes to the fund balance at the end of the year, what we want to put in reserve or what we want to place into something else, one-time capital needs or other projects that would benefit the community that are eligible. So we still have that as part of our discussion. Yes, ma'am, Ms. Herbert.
I just wanted to get from Missy, I think the thing that has time constraints, though, is giving her a number so that the committee can do its work. And so I need to know when you need to know that, or when we need to have that discussion.
Well, we're gonna
because
have a
it-
budget we have budget discussion next week again at
So
1
are we going
o'clock.
to
So-
make that decision next week? I
Well,
just
we
don't-
have to do it by the end of the month because she wants to have it done by for them to meet the 1st of June, so.
That's the main thing. I just want to make sure that we don't throw the time off for them.
By the end of this month would be great.
Okay.
Within the next 2 work sessions, we got to have that number nailed down. What we want to give to the committee, and then we can continue to waffle over all the other stuff.
And we can look at a small number that we can later, if we find, if there's extra money, increase.
Well, we can always set a number that's similar to what we did in the past, and if we have leftover, they can meet again and do additional requests, so.
Yeah.
And we always have requests that come in during the year, so
No.
we need to keep.
I think we have already heard from a few that did not meet the grant deadline, and we did not
Well,
entertain them.
that's
Every
the
year.
process.
Oh, I didn't mean to say that.
So I know we're getting close.
We going, 1 o'clock for the next,
Yeah, let's finish up. She's got accommodations.
I have to scoot. Can I just ask one question about accommodations tax? Before I forget. The tourism development fee, which will become available in June or July, right, Jeff?
Actually, the end of the year, I think. First.
But in this next fiscal year,
Yeah.
I mean,
We may have to create a new agreement.
okay, all I'm saying is, one of the things that, when that comes up, I think we should look at that as a capital deal for, as something maybe we use for Finley Park or something like that.
That's kind
That
of
would be
a thought
awesome.
process. That's a thought process.
Yep.
Well, it's not on this list, thank God.
Okay, so just to wrap up then on accommodations tax, that projected budget is 2.6 million. Similarly, we did include on here what's been requested. Historically, city council has allocated to 2 groups from accommodations tax, even though we do have a few additional requests from other applications this year. Accommodations tax is pretty well subscribed in state law in terms of how you can allocate it. So roughly 95% of the budget is allocated to tourism and marketing-related facilities and activities. Historically, city council has allocated those funds to the Experience Columbia, and the other amount is to Lake Murray Country. With Experience Columbia receiving 85% of the budget, and Lake Murray receiving 15% of the budget. We also have what's called the general purpose portion of the budget, which is 5% of the budget. And then those can be used basically for general type of activities. Historically, we have used those funds to allocate to the city's One Columbia contract. And in the past, there was a Together We Can Read. This year, Together We Can Read did not occur, so those funds were utilized for Inspire Real Change contract. Again, we have not made any recommendations for our allocations. That committee, by law, has to meet. So there is also an accommodations tax committee that is separate.
So on the line item, where is the Experience Columbia total listed?
So under expenditures versus accommodations tax allocations, the total of $2.5 million, I collapsed it there because because we do have we have a few other applications this year.
Okay.
But I can get you the amount that is allocated to both Lake Murray, and I should have included that in the memo, but.
Call out Inspire Real Change or some of the other council members, because I think they know the person, but not the name.
So Inspire Real Change was a contract that was awarded 2 council meetings ago for homeless services.
I don't remember.
Tracy.
Tracy Dobbins.
Yeah.
That's our survey of all our providers of homeless services, so we actually have and understand who does what, when, and where.
Yes, sir.
All right. Thank you.
All right, you going to the fort?
Did you get?
So wrapping up the budget calendar, just to give everyone an expectation about the way the budget works, the budget calendar. So as Mayor Rickaman and Ms. Wilson have mentioned, we will bring back additional budget discussions for you starting next week that will be added to your regular city council meeting on May the 17th. So that's an additional time on your calendar. To meet the public hearing requirements and deadlines for the June 7th budget public hearing and first reading, which is a regular council meeting date, we would need to send the advertisement to the newspaper by May the 19th. So next council meeting is the last time before we actually have to advertise. The grainy picture.
Everybody here is clear on what that means is the number, it's the bottom line number. Everything else we can change in between, we can move from department to department, whatever, but we have to publish that final number.
So that grainy picture on the right, Mayor, is showing the actual advertisement that is This is prescribed by state law,
That looks
how
like the
we
state
advertise.
papers,
Yeah.
normal.
All right, this is actually prescribed, this is actually prescribed by state law as to how you have to, what you have to include in the advertisement. This is reflective of the general fund budget, so it would be general fund revenues and general fund expenditures. We are scheduled for another budget workshop on May the 24th, which is an additional Tuesday.
We have one next week, starting at 1.
Yeah, I mentioned that.
You did?
Yes.
I'm sorry, I
Is that-
didn't hear you.
It's at the top. And then we have a budget workshop at this point scheduled also on May the 31st, which is another Tuesday. Public hearing and first reading is scheduled for June the 7th, which is a regular city council meeting date. And then, of course, second reading would be June 21st. And our fiscal year begins July 1st.
Thank y'all. I know it's a lot, but we appreciate the time. Appreciate your commitment. Seriously.
It's a lot of information, but this is a good general look, and I think as we go through the next steps, it'll make things a lot clearer and we can see, but it's good discussion. But start, as we're thinking about, think about your questions and thoughts from your overall general and, the clarity, because we really do need to stay on this schedule for June 7th as much as possible. So, and I think the intent, and I want to make sure everybody understands, as we started in this project and this process of the budget is that the intent was always to be able to reinvest in our departments and within the city. We're not looking to extract money to take somewhere else. We really want to invest in the departments, and it could be training, it could be personnel, it could be contract work, however we need to do it. But we're talking about money staying in, but making sure that we're providing the customer service, key word here, customer service to the public.
Everything starts at 1 for the next 4 weeks.
Oh, good, okay. We needed to establish that, so, that's fun.
I'd rather have extra time on the back end. I'd rather get done early than run late.
Erica,
The
after you
31st.
cross-reference, are there any other committees that would conflict with? I don't think so.
I think it was just,
Just that one. Administrative policy.
Yeah. Yeah.
all right, thank you.
Thank you all so much.